I want to get to a better understanding of why police were not called right away, because the events I described were frightening enough that the roommate locked herself in the bedroom. But why not call police? Could she have been in shock for that long?
Well, you know, Mitch, they call it fight or flight, but it's actually fight, freeze, or flight. We see this in police officers. We see this in soldiers on the battlefield. It's in the activation of what we call the sympathetic nervous system, and chemicals like adrenaline are released, which prepares your body basically for the fight of its life. And sometimes people can freeze up where they become disconnected from their thoughts and emotions, which is what we call dissociation. So this is a response that can happen in anyone. And a lot of people will say, well, I would react this way or that way, but no one really knows until they're in the situation. So I don't think we can judge too harshly here.
So
Hey guys, so that is I guess a psychiatrist who is giving his assessment there. And I must say, I've heard it before. I've heard before where people will say, well, everybody grieves differently. So when it's an intimate partner situation, they'll say, why does the suspect not appear to be very emotional? Why doesn't he seem to be grieving? No. Everyone grieves differently. Oh, is that why it doesn't appear very emotional? In this case, it's kind of like, well, you know what? There's flight or flight, and there's also freeze. But do you freeze for 6 hours? Are you frozen for 6 hours? And it reminds me in the Oscar Pistorius case, I wrote a couple of books about that. He was kind of saying, you know, he heard a sound in front of the door, right? He was armed, he was standing in front of the door, and he heard a sound, and he was sort of terrified, and that was the sort of story. And I remember trying to explain to someone who kind of came up with the same thing, where they said, yeah, but you've got no idea how someone might respond, that they might be really terrified. And then I said, well, try standing in front of a door yourself, right? Close a door, stand in front of it, and kind of be like, okay, door, scare me, like I'm ready to be terrified, right? It can only last for so long before you go, oh, well, I guess there's nothing there. In other words, that very heightened response where you panicked and frozen, it doesn't last hours and hours and hours. Certainly not in my experience. What do you guys say about that? Just bear in mind, when we talk about the survivor that we're dealing with here, we're going to use her initial out of, in sort of deference to the affidavit. Are you guys happy with that? I think that's quite a good opinion there, and I kind of share it in a sense. I actually had a near-death experience a couple of months ago where a vehicle was basically overran a traffic circle, and I was parked on the other side of it, and I was standing waiting for pizza. And there was a moment, it lasted about half a second, where I froze, where I sort of felt like, well, first of all, I felt time was standing still, but also felt like if I try to outsprint this vehicle, I will get half a meter before it just crashes into me. So I also had that feeling of being frozen. As I said, it lasted about half a second. So Liesel, good to see you here. Liesel says, it's been a lingering question. How could she freeze until noon the next day? Yeah. So let's continue listening to what this expert says.
Understand freezing in the moment when a potential murderer or at least just a strange man is in your home after 4 a.m. What I don't quite understand at this time is the police were not called until about noon the next day. That's the information we have. And also the roommates had called other people over because they were concerned about the roommates. So they called friends to come over before they.
So I think that is a really good point. So when you unfreeze, presumably she unfroze and then called friends over. Couldn't you say, well, when you unfroze, shouldn't you then do the right thing? Shouldn't you call law enforcement? I mean, there isn't a more horrible, desperate criminal. I mean, nothing nearly on the scale of criminality as what happened here had ever happened in Moscow before. And so it's like, well, the first person I'm going to call is my pal. Well, what are they going to do? What is your pal going to do about the situation? Well, let's call another pal. What are they going to do about the situation? I mean, you can call hundreds of pals. What are they actually ultimately going to be able to do about the situation? So someone sent me a message saying, do you think D, or I don't think she said D, but do you think someone cleaned up the crime scene, right? Do you think someone cleaned up, for example, bloody shoe prints? And my answer was, I think the stampede of people coming into the house likely muddied and trampled and sort of turned whatever shoe prints were there kind of into just a noise of contaminated evidence. But the one shoe print that wasn't contaminated was one of the very last, very close to Dee's room, which, and I'm going to show you guys a schematic in a moment, which, bear in mind, every step that the person takes, the amount of fluid that the shoe has to make an imprint is diminished. So first step, maximum, then slightly less, and eventually it's almost invisible to the naked eye. That doesn't mean someone's cleaned it up. It simply means that the ability to leave an impression naturally just decreases. Does that make sense? So anyway, let's see what the expert says here to this idea of freezing for a long time and how should you behave after that. The other thing that's really going to be interesting is what did law enforcement observe with the roommates? Did they seem, it's probably very likely that they did seem shocked, but did they have any agency? Were they using their phones? Did they call their parents? Did they eat anything? Were they chattering with their friends? What is actually going on? What did they observe? And probably that is what the defense in this case is probably going to want to know as well.
They called police. So the state of shock, I'm curious about how long it could possibly last and why they would have called somebody else before they called police.
Well, I don't know that it would last that long, but maybe there's another explanation. Maybe she was afraid. Maybe she was in denial about what she was seeing. Maybe, she had been consuming alcohol. There's any number of reasons that she could have delayed it. But obviously, I don't think it was for any nefarious purpose. I just think it was probably her particular response to something that she couldn't believe that she was seeing. It's also possible that maybe she told herself that maybe this is related to one of the other roommates, that someone else is in the home. We just won't really know. There's really no way to ask, unfortunately.
So I think another question to ask is, can you freeze? In other words, you're in a state of shock and panic and go from that to falling asleep, right? So can you go from a state of being so shocked to your core, almost like electrified, to falling asleep?
And I know this is a difficult question for you to answer, but it's why we have you on. The alleged killer here killed 4 people and then just walked right past a 5th. I'm curious as to what that indicates about the mental state of the suspect in this situation.
So I believe what you're going to find out is that this killer was stalking a particular individual.
Okay, so what do you guys think about that? Do you think that that is likely? And it's quite interesting that at the moment he says that in this clip they show an image of Kaylee Gonzalez, right? How has your thinking changed or stayed the same on that respect? Do you think that one particular person was targeted? What do you guys think? So I'm not asking whether the perpetrator stalked, because we know from the affidavit that he did. I mean, he went to the residence 12 times and then 4 times on the night of the incident, so about 13 times, I guess. So that's definitely the case. But do you think he was targeting one specific individual? So Elon says, is it not Elon Musk, it's Elon Levine says 1 or 2 targeted. Tina says, I think K was targeted. I tend to agree with Kate. It's a good picture of Summer Wells. Just a reminder that that case has still not been solved. I really get the feeling if the crime had gone better for the perpetrator, there wasn't a dog barking, if there wasn't a male in the house, he would have continued killing. Because I think part of this crime was a demonstration, right? So do you remember we've asked the question, what is he trying, what need does he serve by killing? Part of the answer to that is it's a demonstration of something, right? And how you get to the answer, I'm giving away a little bit of insight here. These are my notes on that particular question. I don't know if you can read them. But before you get to the question, what need does he serve by killing? There's a sort of a runner-up question, which sort of gets you there, which gets you to that threshold, which is what is he trying hardest to demonstrate? Not so much, although it applies to this crime, but in terms of his what he's been doing in the weeks, months, and years prior to that moment. In other words, from a particular perspective, what happened on November 13th was absolutely inevitable. There's no way to avoid that within that criminal psychology. So within that criminal psychology, what was he caught up in that he was trying very hard to demonstrate? And then he ultimately demonstrated that in the execution of the crime, which brings us to that question, what need does he serve by killing? So I just want you guys to think about that, and I'm going to obviously provide my assessment of that in a separate analysis. Let's have a look at what some of you guys say. Christopher says we should look at the first statements by Ali, as I think they were the most honest. Okay. I must turn what on? Do you say I must slow down the chat? Turn what on? Sorry, what's that a reference to? I must turn it on. Do you want me to slow down the chat? Please slow chat. Okay, let me do that quickly. I've got a little bit of bad news. I am expecting another power failure in an hour and 8 minutes. May not happen, but I think the level of strain on the system has actually gone up. So if anything, there's a higher likelihood. So sorry about that. I mean, I just think that's what's going to happen. So I'm going to have to try and up the ante and get through the script that I mean to get through pretty quickly. Has that slowed it enough, or do you need me to slow it down even more? Is that slow enough? VV, that's quite a good comment. That's also a good comment. Kerry asked, why does that happen where you live? That's too long an answer. Basically, people are using a power entity as a cash machine, and everybody suffers as a result of that. It's kind of used as a political ploy as well. Anyway, it's a long story. Okay, so let's get going with this analysis. Let's just play one more thing from what he was saying about Kaylee being, well, someone being targeted.
And what do we know about stalkers? We know that the risk of violence increases if there's an intimate relationship with them. We know that the risk of violence increases if there's a history of substance use, criminal.
So in terms of that, do you think there's a history, a relationship history between the suspect here and any of the residents, any of the victims, right? So that's the first question. The other question is, which I think is spot on about, can the violence level increase if there's substance abuse? Well, we know that there was 4 years of serious substance abuse. Okay, what else does he say?
Criminal behavior, unemployment. So I believe that he had contact with one of these victims.
Do you guys believe that? I suppose you could say that he could have had contact via being served at the Mad Greek restaurant. But I don't think that's the contact he's actually referring to. I think he's talking about actual intimate contact and some kind of personal, emotional, typical relationship type scenario. Yeah. Stephanie says a connection. Kovalinsky says a limited amount of contact. Okay, so let's go on to what I want to deal with here. So the killer's master plan was botched by a yapping dog, an ambulant alerted fifth roommate, and at least 2 victims fighting back. If you think about it, that is quite a lot of things going wrong. I mean, just the dog, you would think would be enough to be like, this is ruining my whole day. The fact that you've actually got a roommate running around the house, opening the door, closing the door. Thanks a lot, Sarah. Is also not going to help him concentrate on what he's got to do. And then obviously 2 victims fighting back because they actually weren't really asleep. If you think about the time that he committed the crime, 4:17, well, Xana was still on her phone, I think, 5 minutes earlier. Could she have fallen asleep in 5 minutes? I doubt it. Surely they were eating something that had just been delivered. So the perpetrator kind of had his work cut out for him, wouldn't you say? I also think Madison likely tore off the perpetrator's knife sheath during a violent, half-muffled tussle on her bed, and then the urgent struggle was briefly lit by the green good vibes sign, right? Somebody said, I think it was Lisa who said this to me. If you look at this image here, as far as we know, that good vibe sign was on throughout. It was on the whole night, and then they never really turned it off. In crime scene photography, that sign was on, which suggests that when the criminal entered Madison's room, that sign was on, and almost like that greenish light would have been spooling over the room during the commission of the crime. And think about how sickly ironic it is. Good vibes. Well, someone was getting really sick vibes from this whole situation, and probably was triggered in a way by all of these, well, what the kids who stayed here considered to be good vibes. In other words, what we're talking about is someone was getting bad vibes out of their good vibes, right? It's quite well put, wouldn't you say? It also turns out that and I want to just put up this schematic. Will this allow me to rotate this? No, it won't. Okay. Anyway, we'll look at that schematic in a moment. So it turns out that the silent and deadly assassin that we all imagined was, that we all imagined the silent and deadly assassin, well, he wasn't nearly so silent. Dee, as I mentioned earlier, was roused 3 separate times, which caused her to ultimately intercept the killer after he emerged from Xana's room. And let's have a look at what you guys have voted in the poll.
When you drive less, you should pay less.
So 42% say I believe her 100%. 32% say it's hard to know what to believe, which is quite a diplomatic answer. And then quite a few of you, almost a fifth, say just give her a break. Don't think about it. Don't try and figure it out. Just give her a break. And then 9% say I don't believe any of it. So do you think it's do you see that it's clear that it looks like law enforcement believe a substantial amount of it in order to actually, I mean, it appears in the affidavit, right? So law enforcement, obviously, the amount of her narrative that appears in the affidavit is the amount that they actually believe. What I think is quite interesting is that there's virtually no narrative from B, nothing. Now, does that mean they don't accept her narrative, or that it has absolutely no value, or that she didn't see here or anything? And I mean, she was furthest from the crime scene, but also in the house. You know, didn't D ever speak to her? Okay. So in this analysis, we're going to try and make sense out of Dee's story in terms of where she was, what route the killer had to take to exit through the sliding door, and we also want to deal with issues the prosecution are going to need to figure out. And to be honest, they kind of slyly excised some of these issues from the affidavit. So the first point I want to make is that her story does make sense. When you look at the schematic, her story does make sense. I want to put this up as a pinned comment, as a highlighted comment just for a moment. So let me take myself out of the thing. So this is the mid-level, right? This is the level where the kitchen is, and the living room, and also Xana's bedroom where Ethan was staying over that night. And this was not a vacant bedroom. So let's take this away. This was not a vacant bedroom here. This was, in fact, where Dylan stayed. And I don't know about you, but I didn't know until the affidavit that D was actually occupying this room. I think a lot of us thought that she was staying downstairs. Do you guys agree with that? Right? So this is the part that's really important to bear in mind. If you look at the schematic, and we're assuming that this is accurate, look where the door is, right? Look where the door is. Look where Xana's room is. And if the perpetrator elects not to go down there, right? And it's possible that he didn't enter through the front door. But anyway, if the perpetrator elects not to go down there, he may also, like we have, assume that that it's two people per level. You may have assumed that, and instead it was two people at the top, three people in the mid-level, and one at the bottom, right? It doesn't really say too much for his surveillance. In any event, if the perpetrator came out over there, right, and is kind of in this position over here, right, and at this point he sees D over here, what is the quickest exit? Is it down there and out? And that's assuming he is very, very familiar with the layout. In other words, he knows just down the stairs is the front door. But he may also be worried if she's ambulant, well, the person down the stairs might be as well. And he's just had a surprise probably in this room. And so the issue is, if he came out here and saw someone, wouldn't his first thought be like fight or flight? Well, what is the quickest way out of here from this position? Or wouldn't it be just like that? Literally, if you had to imagine it, which way would be quicker? That way down the stairs and out there, but possibly being seen right as you stepped out into the road, right from the front door, or out the side entrance over here. But that would also mean he would have to walk directly, a few steps directly towards the survivor. And isn't that exactly what happened? He did walk towards the survivor in order to reach this point and then go out. And obviously, if he'd come in this way, wouldn't it have make sense to also leave this way? It does also raise another question. Why leave this person alive? Well, maybe he felt at that stage, it's over. The dog is barking, and I did a video just prior to this dealing with the acoustics. The dog was barking constantly. Also, there was so much noise that Dee actually heard quite a lot of it. She heard voices, she heard noises, she heard like the sound of crying. And you may have thought, well, if she's awake, if there's anybody else in the house, they might be awake as well. And maybe there's even more people in the house that he doesn't know about after his encounter here. And so bear in mind, if he's not literally walking around the house, looking through windows, if he's driving around, he may not have a very accurate idea of who is at the house at any particular time, right? But can you see how if he's advancing from there, in order to go out there, he does have to walk in this direction. He's not walking in order to confront someone standing there, he's just walking in order to get out. And possibly it's somewhere here that the one remaining shoe print was left, somewhere over here, maybe somewhere here. It may also have been left when he came down the stairs. So if he first went up the stairs and then came down, it may have been left here, and then he went over there. And maybe he also assumed that this was a vacant bedroom because when he arrived there, the lights were out early on. And there's very little windows facing outward. There's just one over there. So maybe that's the reason. Okay, glad to see that. Okay, so I want to show you this image now as well. Regardless of Dee's position, if the killer didn't want to take another set of creaky stairs down and out the front door, and if his encounter with Ethan and Xana had taken longer than he'd anticipated, bear in mind, like, I don't know what you guys believe, but I believe that the tussle with Ethan and Xana was the third and fourth victim. And you would almost imagine at that point he would be quite tired. I mean, he's got to vigorously and forcefully stab one person in a very intense, frenetic way in order to dispatch that person. Then he's got to repeat that with another person. Each successive person is probably going to struggle more and more against him. And so he's got to work very quickly, but it's almost like more effort every successive person. And eventually he comes up against a guy, and by the time he'd reached the fourth victim, he may have also been tired and also covered in blood as well. Okay, so I think if he'd anticipated that Ethan and Xana, basically Xana, would have been easy to take care of, excuse the euphemism, well, if she was awake, definitely not the case. Also, if Xana had cried out during the assault, he may have also felt, okay, my cover is blown, right? And then his only option for a quick exit. So if you just take that aspect, if Xana cried out, then he would have probably felt, wow, it's dead quiet outside. Someone may have heard that I need to get the heck out of here. And it turns out that sounds were heard in a camera that was literally, 50 feet away. Sounds that were taking place in Xana's room were heard by a Ring doorbell camera just around the corner. And so it would make sense for the killer to be concerned about that. So anyway, that would mean bypassing the bathroom, entering the foyer, moving right past. So let's bring that back up. Bypassing the bathroom. So another question that comes up is, did he come out of the bathroom, or was he coming straight out of this room? Did he have time to go out this room and into the bathroom, or did he go straight out? Another question to ask is, did he use the bathroom upstairs at the top level? That's a good question. In terms of timing, well, he said he thought he heard it, I think, close to, did he say close to 4 a.m.? I think he said he went to bed at about 4 a.m. I have another reason for not thinking that that is credible. First of all, no scream is picked up in the Ring doorbell audio. Second of all, there's a lot of noise of a dog barking. So there's constant dog barking. So why didn't the person who said he heard the scream hear a dog barking? There was a lot more of that to hear. So why didn't he hear it? Okay, so a friend of mine sent me this schematic, and that just gives you a better idea, almost if you were there. This is the lounge. This is the view of the lounge. There's the stairs going down. There is the doorway into Dee's room, and you can see it's right beside the stairway, right? Sorry, let me just deal with this question. Kooky Cat says, could the doorbell have picked up somebody talking to himself? I suppose, but I personally don't think that he would do that. He seems to me to be quite a quiet guy. He's not, I don't think he's an extrovert. I think he's an introvert. I don't get the idea that he would be mumbling or talking while he's doing that. But I do think it may have picked up him getting out his vehicle, the sound of that, the vehicle door closing, perhaps even footsteps. So that is certainly possible. Thanks for your question. So if you struggling to understand what you're seeing here, this is the lounge, right? Here's the lounge. There's Dee's bedroom. That is the stairway. This, in a way, is the view the perpetrator may have had coming out of the out of Xana's bedroom. So in other words, he would have his back to the bedroom. So basically standing basically over here, right? So we're going to go back to that. The stairway is on his left, and the doorway to the room is there, and behind him is Xana's bedroom. Are you guys making sense of it now? So in order to exit the scene, he needs to go either that way and out that way. Can you see my cursor? In order to exit, he needs to go that way and out, or that way and down. But he doesn't really necessarily know who's there, and it would mean going down creaky stairs. He may feel from this perspective, she's easy to take care of because she's frightened, and he can see that. And he's already moving, and he's just going to continue moving and go out perhaps the way that he came. And here's another schematic that really just illustrates this. So thanks, Lisa, for passing this on. So this is Xana's room, and so that's the route that the perpetrator took out out through the kitchen and through the sliding door. That's the sliding door. There is Dee's bedroom. There's the doorway, right? And you can see if he committed at some point to coming this way, he would have to advance towards her if she was standing at the door, and it would look like he's coming straight towards her. And then he would turn to go out there. If you just think about if Xana wanted to go out the kitchen door, she would take exactly the same path because there's no door over here. So just wanting to exit from this point, and that is another way to think about it. Could the perpetrator have at some point in this, after this scuffle, decided that's it, and I'm now going to cut and run? And so his pre-programmed route in his mind was, I need to leave right away, and I'm going to leave according to this line. And when he saw someone standing there, he was already in a flight mode, and that's what he continued doing. And I mean, all of that suggests that he totally botched the crime, that he basically ran out of his own story, that he was in the middle of committing the crime, and then things started going wrong, and then he lost his nerve, right? Don't you get that idea? Did he perceive her as a threat? I think he perceived his situation as dangerous, that he could actually get caught. And bear in mind, things had already gone wrong immediately. He'd lost the sheath of his knife, right? Things had already gone wrong kind of from the start. The dog barking started at 4:17 and didn't stop. So quite a lot of things went wrong. So do you feel that you better understand the story that Dee gave and why it makes sense that the perpetrator would walk or move towards her on his way out, right? Having seen the schematic, does that now make more sense to you? I've kind of got a reservation with that. On the one hand, I sort of feel, okay, that does make sense, and you kind of get that tone and that sense from the affidavit. On the other hand, would the perpetrator really walk? And the word walk appears 3 times in this regard. The word walk appears 3 times right in that paragraph dealing with how he's moving. Would he really walk? And also, why on earth would someone freeze if someone's just walking past them? They're not running. There's no obvious threat to them. There's not even a mention of a knife or seeing anything on the knife, right? Let's have a look. So Stephanie says, in your opinion, who did the perp attack first? I think it's Kaylee. I think Kaylee was attacked first, not necessarily because he targeted her, but because she was awake. She was the one who probably said, there's someone in the house, right? And then I think, and I mean, so I think she was awake, attacked first, and was attacked quite viciously as a result, and then there were defensive wounds. And then I think Maddie was attacked next, but Maddie was trying to actually fend off the attacker and perhaps even pull him away from Kaylee, and that's how the knife sheath came off. That's the way I see it, but I definitely don't think that Ethan and Xana were the first 2 victims. I think they were the last 2. And Dee's story confirms that. Dee's story says that the perpetrator left Xana's room and then left the house, which suggests that idea. I had that idea all along, that the killer would probably start at the top and work his way down, not the opposite. because if he did it in the opposite way, he would trap himself. The uppermost level doesn't have an exit unless he jumps off the balcony. The upper level doesn't really have a convenient exit, right? Does that make sense? Okay. CFS says, could another male heard by D have been the one saying, I'm going to help you? So you think he had an accessory? I don't think that's the case. Yeah, I don't think that's the case. I think it would be quite clear if that was the case. Okay. Right, let's continue. So yeah, you get a better idea once again, having looked at that schematic. Bear in mind the perpetrator is in this part of the house. Can you guys see that? The perpetrator is here, and he wants to get out as fast as possible. He wants to get out here, right? And that's why he's literally doing a C maneuver, and then this is where D's room is, right? So he's going from here, trying to come out that way. And that's also why it's quite an interesting question. Was there no blood trail found here? Was there absolutely no evidence found here? And I think part of the answer to that is not if there's a stampede of students coming in and out of this entrance. And we've noticed when there were parties that this was used as an entry and exit quite often, quite regularly. In fact, when there was the noise complaint of, was it mid-August, this is where Kaylee spoke to the officer, and just shows how often this particular area was utilized. The other thing is possibly the blood trail ran out. There's no more fluid absorbed by the shoe by the time he got to this, by the time he got to the kitchen even, right? Okay. So let me just read what I've written here. Whether the killer intended to leave the scene once he'd completed his foul work inside Xana's room, or whether he'd planned on dispatching D as well, the moment he elected not to go downstairs, while the only route was towards the foyer, which is exactly where D's door opens up to. So if D was standing at her door, yes, the killer would have to move towards her and past her in order to exit through the kitchen and the sliding door. Now, this is the part that I kind of disagree with that psychiatrist, which is I can understand a frozen thing happening. If someone's coming towards you, I can understand being frozen. But if he then passes you, and then you actually know, and this is in the affidavit, you know that he passes you, goes to the kitchen, and exits through the sliding door, why would you not have the sort of cognitive ability to say the threat is past, sort of heave a sigh of relief and be sort of back to operations? And I can tell you, when I had my near-death experience where the vehicle narrowly missed smashing right into me and sideswiped my vehicle with my dog in it, by the way, that's exactly what happened. I had a moment of extreme fear, panic, and paralysis. Then the vehicle, I could see that it wasn't going to hit me, and then it smashed into a vehicle I was standing right next to. And then there was a feeling of shock and relief and whatever, but then you able to, because the threat is past, you can see it's past, the vehicle's no longer moving, you then kind of come out of your shock. You're still somewhat traumatized, but you're able to sort of do something. And so one of the things I did was I went to check how badly my vehicle was damaged. I went to check on my dog. I can't remember in which order it was, but thank goodness my dog my dog could probably have died in that situation. And also sort of paid attention to the people in the vehicle. Were they inebriated? It turned out they were, et cetera, et cetera. But you come out of that state, and within a few minutes, a policeman came on the scene, and I said to him, hey, I'm a witness. I think you need to take my statement. So I came out of the shock pretty quickly. I was out of the shock quick enough to go home, collect my phone because I didn't have my phone with me, return to the scene, record it, and even post it on Instagram. You might say, yeah, but you're not that person and whatever. Yeah, but when the threat is passed, why would you still stay in shock? I mean, you see the threat passing. You see the person leave your home. Why wouldn't the threat pass? Stephanie says, I would be hyperventilating. Yes, but bear in mind, she hasn't seen anything. She hasn't seen any of the victims. She simply saw someone walk by her, saw his eyebrows, and then she went back into her room. But I mean, wouldn't the safest thing be to call for help? Because if someone's just attacked you in your home and you just go into your room, you're sitting duck. So wouldn't the best course of action be go to your room, but then call for help then and there? So let's have a look at a couple of more of these images. Here's another one. So another question that comes up is, what door was open? Was it the sliding door? Was it the front door? Can you imagine the perpetrator rushing to get out? Do you believe that he walked out, or do you think he ran? And do you think he would have closed the door after him? What do you think? Do you think he left the sliding door open or not? So the question nevertheless emerges, how did the killer not leave a blood trail? And if a shoe print in blood was recovered right in front of Dee's door, what about all the other shoe prints that had to have been coming out of Xana's bedroom, leading to the one at Dee's door? I have dealt with that. The answer is these had to have been destroyed, all the other shoe prints, by traffic entering the crime scene. It's likely several kids queued up outside Xana's room, knocked on the door, try to figure out what is going on. Did they see the blood on the floor? Was there any, did they think it was dirt? Did they realize it was blood, or was it all trampled so badly that you couldn't really tell? Or was the blood obscured by dirt and snow and sort of trampled in? Now I want to show you something that I find really interesting. Doesn't really have a bearing on the perpetrator, but I think it is quite interesting. So have a look at this image, and do you notice where the ladder is? And do you notice it's right below that little ledge? I mean, I have brought this up before, right? It's right below that ledge, and if you got on there, if you went up there, climbed onto there, and then went over there, you could maybe try to look through this window. You might knock on the window or try to look through that window, right? Bear in mind, this window is often, you could often see inside that window. This is Dee's room, right? Now have a look at this image. This is an image from the 16th of August, right? Now have a look here. There's the ladder and it's on its side. So wasn't the ladder normally on its side, and it was used here to get onto that little ledge to look into that window? Do you guys agree? Here it is on its side in August. in November, there it is propped right below that point. This image gives you an even better sort of view. Look how directly alongside that it is, right? If you wanted to get onto that little ledge, that's exactly where you'd go up. Not on that side of it, that side of it. And bear in mind, this is Xana's room, this sort of block over here. That's Xana's room. That's where the blood traces were leaking out. And I actually think poor Xana was actually lying here. And I think the thud that was heard by the Ring doorbell was Xana actually knocking against this side of the house. Thanks, Maury. Maury says some form of psychedelics were used that night, and that would explain the fear of phoning 911. Definitely, I think if someone was high or on some kind of substance, the last person you'd want to phone is law enforcement in a scenario where they would say, "Oh, are you high? So something has happened here, but we are also going to do something about you," right? I think that is a valid thing. I think it is a valid thing. Kerry says the living room window is opposite Xana's room. Oh, okay, that's a good point. That is the living room window. Sorry, you're right. Just shows you I'm still trying to figure some basic things out. You're right. The window that is her window is on the opposite side. That's why I don't like I would prefer this turned around the other way. So there you have it. There's the living room window. Absolutely right. Thanks a lot for that. Carlito says, I don't agree. The ledge is too precarious. It's actually not. If you look at this ledge, it's quite a few feet wide. I would happily get up there. And I wouldn't feel like I'm in fear for my life. So, I mean, it's 2 ladders wide. It's actually quite wide. It's probably maybe just less than 1 meter wide. And it's not really that high off the ground. I mean, if you're athletic, you could literally jump off that ledge without anything happening to you. So anyway, it's just an idea. If you don't think it's likely, then it's like, okay, sorry, I wasted your time. So what do you think? Did the killer close and lock the door to their room when he left? That's the other issue. All right. What do you guys say to that? Did the killer close and lock the door to Xana's room when he left? In other words, for the roommates to say, we can't get into the room, there's someone unconscious inside. Well, why can't you get in? Well, so does that mean the killer came out the room after the assault with Ethan and Xana, and then closed the door and locked it, and then he walked out? Is that what happened? Christy says closed but not locked. Because the alternative is, if he didn't do that the door was actually open and one of the students closed it for plausible deniability. We don't know what's going on inside. That raises a potentially sticky issue. You know, you could have a situation where I need several hours either to get the drugs that I'm in out of my system, and there is a formula for that. You know, you need to drink certain things or whatever, or I need several hours in order to come down from my high. Bear in mind it's a Saturday night going into Sunday morning. how are we going to explain why we didn't call the police for 8 hours? Well, we couldn't get in the room and we were just asleep. Okay, that is our explanation. So, yeah. So when Dee saw the killer, had he just emerged from Xana's bedroom or from the bathroom? What do you think? One possible explanation for Dee's apparently contradictory behavior is if she'd been trying to sleep. Bear in mind it was 4 a.m. She was trying to sleep, and maybe she actually took a sleeping pill or some other depressant substance or whatever, perhaps close to 4 a.m. It's like, wow, it's 4 a.m. I've really got to get to sleep. I've got to be somewhere, whatever. And then she encountered the killer. In other words, she took the sleeping pill, and then she encountered the killer, and then in a short time after that, the strong sleeping pill actually went into effect. That would be a very innocent explanation for that, right? But then why not just say that? Why not just say, why not have that appear in the affidavit if that's the case? It could account for her being shocked. So if she did take a sleeping pill, it could account for her being shocked, going to her room, rapidly losing consciousness as the fear and anxiety subsided. It could also explain how she remained unconscious for several hours. Maybe one reason they don't mention the sleeping pill is to give the defense something to work for, something to figure out, not do their job for them. Besides, you don't want to create doubt in your own affidavit. You want to present the strongest possible narrative. Okay, so it doesn't quite account for the other survivor also failing to alert authorities. So let's bring me back in. Or why a camera 50 feet away picked up thuds, cries, whimpers, whereas those inside the house apparently didn't hear this. If there were thuds, cries, whimpers, barking, and it was heard 50 feet away, by a camera right outside the house, well, why was that? What about someone who was probably half that distance vertically downward? And maybe the answer is because the house was ordinarily creaky and noisy, and noises was something they didn't necessarily pay attention to or were used to tuning out. They were used to someone else making loud music and then just shrugging and going along with it. Is that a possibility? So while some elements of Dee's story make sense, some of it I feel doesn't. Did she not see the knife in the killer's hand? It's a simple question. I noticed his bushy eyebrows. I noticed that he was dressed entirely in black. I noticed that you couldn't see his mouth or his nose. But I noticed he had bushy eyebrows. I noticed that he was quite tall. Well, didn't you notice that he had a knife in his hand while he was walking towards you, past you, and out the door? Because the other side of it is, why would you be frozen simply by a dark figure walking by you? I mean, if you didn't know that this person was a killer, then why wouldn't you assume that it's Ethan or someone kind of playing a prank? Or, why would you assume that? And if you knew it was something bad, then why wouldn't you then take steps? So if you knew that someone had done something, why wouldn't you, after he exits the house, go to Xana's room and find out, are you okay? Wouldn't most people do that? Isn't that a reasonable thing to say? I'm terrified. I've just seen this, but the terror's now left the building. But where did he come from? Where did he come out of? Xana, are you okay? I thought I heard crying sounds. I thought I heard a noise that could have been Kaylee, I thought I heard a guy saying, I'm going to help you. Well, your room is just a few seconds walk away from that other person's room, and you've got 7 hours to make an inquiry. Aren't you even going to be wondering, what is that all about, to kind of go and make that inquiry? I mean, here is the schematic. That's how far she needs to go just to knock on the door and say, hey, are you guys okay? Right? So why not do that? And if she's too scared to go there, why not just go upstairs? Why not just go from there straight upstairs? Kaylee, are you okay? And what about the dog barking that I mean, surely she can hear the dog barking, right? So, yeah, so if you say you're terrified, what is the longest you've ever been terrified? Can I answer that question? I once, in 1995, I jumped out of an aeroplane and my parachute didn't open properly. It sort of opened, let's say, 80%. The end cells didn't open properly. And I was probably terrified for about a minute. I couldn't quite remember, is it this cord to pull in order to release the chute and pull the reserve, or does this one initiate the reserve, which would then tangle up into the other chute? So for about a full minute, I was really, really, really afraid. And then I actually became habituated to the fear, like nothing happened. I was just falling quite fast. And then I noticed the end cells did gradually open. And it was sort of disaster avoided. But that's, I think, the longest I've been truly terrified. 1 minute. What's the longest you've been truly terrified? Stephanie says, according to the affidavit, the officer saw Xana on the floor as he approached her room. Her door was open. Yeah, but bear in mind, he wasn't the first officer on the scene. He was led through the scene, and there were other officers there before him. So I agree that Xana was on the floor, and that's actually contrary to what we heard in the beginning, that everyone died in their beds and everyone was asleep. I wonder whether that wasn't said to almost placate the killer, that there were no witnesses because everyone was asleep. Actually, there were witnesses. Terry says 3 hours for me. Okay. Right. So ironically, just as Dee's story conveniently leaves out difficult aspects, in other words, it minimizes certain realities while choosing a selective reality, the affidavit does exactly the same thing as well. What do you guys think of that statement? Is it a mean statement? GLO, thanks so much. Glow says the 911 call should be made public. I think it will eventually be. I wouldn't be surprised if the 911 call is something that the defense uses as one of their best exhibits. You know, something that creates doubt and uncertainty, because like we haven't heard the 911 call. When you do hear it, you're probably going to get a sense of, whoa, that's what happened. I didn't really expect that. I didn't really realize this is the atmosphere, kind of thing. Okay, so according to my clock here, I've got 17 minutes left before the power is supposed to go out. So let's deal with the affidavit. And I think this is quite interesting. The affidavit is a sanitized, oversimplified narrative. Now, I'm not trying to say that the affidavit is wrong, just that that is what it is. It's simple, but I mean, it's 19 pages. And you don't really want to provide a 1,000-page narrative. That's for the trial. That's the evidence for the trial to deal with, that sort of detail, right? Christopher says you are right to question Dee's account. It's possible she didn't see anything and slept through it. Yeah, I mean, we are trying to just think critically. We're not trying to witch hunt Dee. We're not trying to blame her. We're simply trying to figure out what happened and what lies behind, let's call it, a certain amount of economy with information. That's really all it is. So it's important to note that the narrative of the affidavit written by Corporal Brett Payne, who was neither the first responding officer nor a highly ranked technician, is simply one of several. And Stephanie, this might help address your question about, but when the officer arrived there, the door was open, right? This might address that aspect, right? He wasn't the first responding officer, and he wasn't part of the CSI technicians that were already processing the scene. He only arrived there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Payne's job that Sunday afternoon was ostensibly to secure the scene, but as we know, the scene had been disrupted and interfered with long before any Ali officers were summoned to the scene. As you're about to see in this analysis, Payne's narrative is a very simplified version of a complicated and seriously compromised crime scene. What stands out, as I pointed out previously during a live discussion, is what's missing from the affidavit. What is missing from the affidavit? Well, first of all, the timing of the 911 call. There's no mention in the affidavit of what time the 911 call was made. You simply have Payne arriving on the scene. There already other officers. He also doesn't mention encountering the survivors on scene, only that they are spoken to much later, right? So what else is missing? So the circumstances surrounding the 911 call are missing. The timing of the 911 call, the person who made the call and also who didn't make it, and then also the strange language of the call reporting someone as unconscious. Think about that. It's kind of minimizing language, isn't it? There was no one who was unconscious. Yeah, or that friends were called. That's right. Verbal Judo says, thanks everyone for not tolerating victim shaming. I'm a trauma survivor too. This kind of community makes me feel safe to discuss uncomfortable topics. So we're not trying to shame anybody. I hope that's clear. The fact that when the officers arrived, the front door was open and had been for hours. And I think what also comes up there was the side door open as well. You won't really know that if the other students came in through the side door, would they have opened it, closed it, opened it, closed it? Who was the first student to arrive there? Also, did someone in the house close the side door? Was the side door left open? It's quite complicated, some of these questions for simple matters. Which door did the perpetrator come in? Did he leave it open or not? Did he leave bedroom doors open or not? And then also, the affidavit doesn't mention anything about there being a stampede of students into the crime scene prior to calling Ali. And that did lead to gross contamination. And the reason I don't really want to mention that is as soon as you mention that, if you acknowledge that in the affidavit, it's leading to doubt. So, for example, if you acknowledge that students were running in and out the crime scene, then you might immediately say that knife sheath, is it something that is so significant, or could someone have put it there? Could someone have touched it? Could someone have did someone walk into all of the crime scenes that wasn't the perpetrator? Officer Payne mentions none of this when he arrives at the scene some 4 hours after 911 is called, right? 911, I think, was called at 11:58. He arrived at 4 o'clock, right? He arrived also well after the processing of the scene had occurred. All of the above issues present serious hurdles for the prosecution while providing Coburger's defense with several opportunities to create reasonable doubt. The fact that the affidavit emphasizes Payne's narrative, given the other narratives that are available, is an effort to excise the issues with the prosecution case from the trial narrative, at least at the outset. Now, I'm not trying to say that I think the defense are going to win this case or that it's going to be a slam dunk for the defense. I'm not saying that at all. I have studied the law. I have sat in on court cases. All I'm saying is I don't think this is necessarily going to be a slam dunk for the prosecution. That's what I'm trying to say. Are you guys with me? Bear in mind the crime scene photographer would have her narrative and likely far more detail than Payne's, especially if you include the photos of the scene. The lead detective would have his incisive version of events as well. The chief of the Idaho State Police forensic team would have his ultra-detailed, precise report as well of all the important forensic evidence, but he would probably also be able to say how much was contaminated. And then the initial responding officers would have their contextually rich impressions of when and how they arrived at the house as well. I've got 10 minutes left. I'm going to just allow the power to go out and then turn the StreamYard off if that's what happens on my phone. So 10 minutes, hopefully it doesn't go off, but we'll see. When you collate Payne's narrative, the part actually dealing with the scene and the state of the victims inside comprises a small fraction of the affidavit. So I'm going to place all the text that really deals with the scene inside the house, what Payne sees. I'm going to show that to you in this red underlined text. And it basically amounts to a single page, one page out of 19 pages. The rest of all of those pages actually deal with lots of other things, going outside, the vehicle's movements, the phone's movements, the goings on in Pennsylvania, blah, 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 right? This is dealing with what Officer Payne sees, and it's basically less than a page. He says, as I entered this bedroom, I could see two females in a single bed in the room. Both Gonsalves and Mogan were deceased with visible stab wounds. I also later noticed what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath on the bed next to Mogan's right side. That's all he mentions. I saw two females in the bed. They had stab wounds, and then I saw a knife sheath. That's it. That's the extent of that crime scene, the scene in that bedroom. He doesn't say what they were wearing, how their clothes were torn, the expressions on their faces, all of which he would have, as a human being, picked up. It's not necessary, though, to have that in the affidavit. This is the next section. Okay, thanks for that. Next, thank you. So it says here, yeah, that's also true. It's the only time that a knife is mentioned. So it says here, during the processing of the crime scene, investigators found a latent shoe print. This was located during the second processing of the crime scene. So when Payne actually arrived there, they didn't actually notice the shoe print. So you could actually argue that even the officers contaminated the crime scene through stomping around, through their foot traffic. And it came up using amino black, a protein stain that detects the presence of cellular material. The detected shoe print showed a diamond-shaped pattern of a Vans-type shoe sole just outside the door of DM's bedroom. This is consistent with her statement regarding the suspected path of travel. So the other thing that I think you've got to think about is surely law enforcement would have tried to get a list of all the kids that came into the house that day after the crime had been committed, and then also get a record of all of their footwear. And was anyone else wearing a Vans type shoe sole? If the answer is yes, well, then this evidence doesn't necessarily mean anything. If the answer is no, and I mean, is it a comprehensive list? Anyway, that's going to be another contest between the prosecution and the defense. And then there's this last little section as well. Conodal's room. As I approached the room, I could see a body laying on the floor. Conodal was deceased with wounds which appear to have been caused by an edged weapon. And then there's obviously the part dealing with Ethan after a redacted document. And I think that redacted document is kind of a map saying, or maybe even dealing with the autopsy. So it's not necessary for an affidavit to read like a true crime novel. In fact, it's not supposed to have drama and suspense, emotions, or sentiment, just the facts. Nevertheless, what the officers saw is another narrative excised from view. The staring eyes, the paint-splattered limbs, the gouges in shirts and smooth skin. It says here, this is from People magazine, when officers arrived at 1122 King Road in Moscow on the afternoon of November 13, they saw a macabre scene. That's not in the affidavit, but that is nevertheless reality. Right? We had officers breaking down at the scene. That's not in Payne's statement. Maybe Payne also broke down. It goes on to say it wasn't a clean crime scene. There was cross-contamination between the rooms. This wasn't a professional job. This was something more haphazard. Now, it's hard to say how much of that cross-contamination was the perpetrator and how much of it was other people arriving at the scene and messing the scene up in terms of that. That's 100% right. That's 100% right. The best affidavit tells you just enough to get your probable cause, no more, no less. Okay. So where it says that was something more haphazard, it wasn't a professional job, it was more haphazard. Don't you think that is a prime descriptor for our PhD candidate? Haphazard. He pretends to be a soldier of the people. Think about someone who's studying criminology. Isn't what he's trying to do is fight the fight against criminals, almost like Batman. He's studying criminology, he's trying to wage a war against criminals, ostensibly, right? He pretends to be a soldier of the people, for the people, by day, while stalking those same people by night. Well, isn't another way of saying that someone who is haphazard in their thinking? Haphazard means, let me just take that away. Haphazard means lacking any obvious principle of organization, random, unplanned, unsystematic, unmethodical, disorganized. So I'm not trying to suggest that Koberger is completely random, completely unplanned, completely disorganized, just that he's a lot more disorganized than he thought. He's a lot more disorganized than we thought. So in other words, organized, but still pretty haphazard. Organized, systematic, but still clumsy and careless. Do you follow what I'm saying? Intelligent, but also capable of making really dumb mistakes. So it looks like I may have 2 minutes left, but I think I'm actually about done. The crime scene ends up being a perfect portrait, possibly of the mind of the killer. Instead of cool, sober, and systematic, it's messy, it's full of mistakes. It's all over the place. It's broken and botched. Given what we know now about the DoorDash delivery and Xana still being awake as late as 4:12 a.m., bear in mind the crime was starting to be committed just 5 minutes later. The killer actually auto-postponed his planned assassination that Sunday morning. But it seems he crossed another criminal line. He ran out of patience. So it looks like we may be dealing with an impatient criminal here. Doesn't that tell us something? What does it tell us? Doesn't it tell us maybe this? The brain of an addict has trouble in terms of self-control, right? So in terms of you see good vibes and you see a party going on and it actually starts making you angry, you feel resentful. You see people having such a great time. They're 20 years old, you're 28, and you've never had such a great time in your whole life. And you're starting to get agitated, you're starting to get angry. Doesn't that make you struggle with your self-control? Or what do you do with those struggles for self-control? Right? What need does he serve by killing? What is he trying hardest to demonstrate through his studies? Addiction is relevant, I think. So I'm not going to take it further than that. I have managed to get to 4 o'clock in the morning here. Power is supposed to go off now or any minute now. So let's try and quickly deal with a few of your comments and see what we can get through while it's still on. Susan, thanks very much. Thanks for that, Katie. Thanks, Songbird. Thank you. What do you think he is angry about? Why is he angry? Lynn says, I think he's good looking. I also do. Like in moments, sometimes when he blinks and the sort of furtiveness, the lack of confidence is less attractive. I think just being confident is attractive. Do you agree with that? Even a good-looking person who's very lacking in confidence isn't particularly appealing. Marlene says addiction could be a mitigating factor at the time of sentencing, unless he's not addicted at the time that the crime was committed. But I suppose you could argue that if he grew up under difficult situation, troubling circumstances, lack of money, could you really do that? Maybe. Jazzy Boop says, where do people get the idea that he's intelligent? Well, he was studying a PhD. It's not a sign that he's a genius. And by the way, in my videos where I call him a mastermind, it's with a bit of sarcasm. I'm going to be doing that, calling him Koberger, the mastermind, the criminal genius. It's with a little bit of tongue in cheek, right? I think he was trying to be those things. The question is, did he succeed? Someone says it's 7 p.m. in Idaho. Handsome Ken, thank you so much for that. Wow, the power is still on, touch wood. Catherine says he's angry about the inferiority he feels. But where does he direct that anger? Who's to blame for his inferiority? And also, what's the source of that inferiority? Teresa says he's been invisible his entire life. I think that's quite a good point. Think about invisible and feeling insignificant. Think about being invisible and feeling powerless and unimportant, feeling as though you're unimportant. I do think that the one sister I've seen does look quite pretty. And maybe he also compares himself to his siblings unfavorably. Well, my sibling is a movie star, what am I? Diane says he's raging against the world and he doesn't want to be an outsider. Stephanie says fear and taking control are motives. But you need to narrow it down to something that's more personal and idiosyncratic. The killer here is very angry, and he's also blaming someone for that, but why? And where does that come from? In other words, why do you have a fairly good-looking guy that has got a fairly good life? I mean, it's not like he doesn't have any money and he's got some kind of terminal illness and he's got like a big growth coming out of his cheek or something. He seems like quite a pleasant-looking fellow. So where does this huge chip come from? Why is he such an oddball? What is the source of that? And in that respect, I want to play you guys, assuming that I still can, I want to play you guys something from this video.
You were sitting right behind his family in the courtroom, I understand. What was their reaction?
Mm-hmm. Very emotional, stunned. They walked in. His mother was just distraught. She was sitting there. And when he walked in, he looked at his family, but he looked directly at his father. And he acknowledged him seriously, but his head was acknowledging him. He sat with his public defender, the chief public defender, turned around a second time, beeline for his father, looked at him. And then the third time he looked and turned around, he scanned his family and just sort of had a very faint smile. But when the proceedings started, the president judge really started to question him. Is this voluntary?
So let me ask you a question. Two questions. Does he seem very connected to his world? In other words, to the students in Pullman, to the students in Moscow, to the student community? Does he have a lot of friends? Does he have a lot of girlfriends? Does he seem connected in terms of the glue and relationships to the people in his sort of immediate environment? In other words, when he's not with his family, when he's out in the world, is he connected to that world? Is he connected in a deep sense? Is he connected in a satisfying sense? Is he connected in a sense where he's got a lot of agency? What would you say? So if you take Jen's comment there and you say, I have the impression that he's not very connected to his environment in terms of at university level, then you put that to one side and you say, ask the same question. Is he very connected to his family, would you say? Would you say he's connected to his father? Would you say he's connected to his mother? Would you say he's connected to his sister? Would you say they are connected to him? Would you say that they've got a strong relationship, right? So I want you to juxtapose that. Is he connected to the real life fabric around him when he's not at home, when he's out working, when he's studying, the student community, right? Bear in mind, when he drives home, he doesn't drive with a pal, he drives with his dad, right? What does Kaylee do? She drives back to the university to celebrate a vehicle with her friend, right? They're people sleeping in beds together and doing all sorts of things together. What's he doing? Well, late at night, he's driving around, snooping around alone. Does he seem very connected to anyone? I mean, he's not even connected to Pullman. He's driven to Moscow to sort of, do his surveillance, right? Even the students that he's teaching are annoyed with him to the extent that they say, "You're grading us too harshly. Let's do something about that." So even in terms of his work situation, there's a sense of, do we really like this guy? Do we really support this guy? Is this guy a jerk, right? That's an interesting point. I think you could make that argument, but I think you could also make the argument that the killer killed 4 people, and I don't know if any of them that it was possible to save any of them. I do have a bit of a problem with that statement. It's okay, I'm going to help you, because it seems like the kind of statement, if I hear that, oh, then I don't have to help you. Not sure if I like that too much. That's just my own personal opinion. But you get what I'm trying to say. Contrast the disconnected relationship with the folks in Pullman, his class, 150 students, that where half of them really are very upset with him, and say that he appears preoccupied and whatnot, and that he goes to a lot of effort to make himself try to sound intelligent. By the way, that's part of the answer to what is he trying hardest to demonstrate? Is in this university setting, what is he trying really, really hard to demonstrate? And then you compare that, all of those disconnections. He doesn't have a girlfriend. He doesn't have really friends. His co-workers and the people don't really seem to like him a lot, right? And then he sees what is going on at this house. He sees friendships and fun and people enjoying themselves and excitement over and over and over again. How does he feel about that? Then you take that and you compare it to when he's in the court, this lady behind him sees how he looks at his father, and we know that he seems to have quite a strong relationship with his father. But think about, is his father really a model for him? He's at university, his father's a maintenance worker. Is he in the right place? Is Koberger doing the right thing? I mean, he was a former security guard. Should he really be studying criminology? Shouldn't he just be maybe a mechanic or something else? Is he in the wrong place in order to be happy? But compare the disconnectedness and the lack of glue in his student setup to these very strong family relationships where he looks at his father looks at him, his father was with him for that long drive back. There's commitment from his family where they're actually sitting there in court. And now you're going to hear how emotional his mother was when the news came out what is going to happen. So let me play the rest here.
Terry, have you been forced? Have you been coerced? She really wanted to make sure it was freely and voluntarily because he has rights in Pennsylvania and he can assert those. But he said it was, and she said, then you will be returned to Idaho to face homicide charges for murder.
So I just want to respond to, looks like the power is still on. Happy about that. But it's probably can still go out for the next 10 minutes. That's the gangplank we sort of walk over here. Anyway, Johnny says, I think it was Ethan saying that as they were both dying. On the one hand, I agree that he might have said, okay, I'm going to help you. On the other hand, if he was dying, would he really be able to say anything? Would he say it's okay? Would you be able to hear him saying anything? Also, why wouldn't he call out for help if he was dying? If he was able to talk to Xana, if he was able to communicate to Xana, why would he not ask for help? Why would he not call to anybody else? Bearing in mind he's also injured.
His mother then just sort of fell into the shoulder of her daughter. You couldn't hear her, but she was crying so hard. The court brings over Kleenex. So
what you're getting here is a first-hand observation of just how sticky that glue is. When they find out that he's going to be extradited, his mother breaks down. And to such an extent that the entire court, what do you call it? The court process is interrupted, and they've actually got to bring their mother Kleenex, right? That is how upset and emotional she is. Why? Because she has a very, very strong, very close relationship with her son. Now, think about what we're talking about. He's got a very strong relationship with his family, but then he has extremely weak relationships with literally everybody else. And that's where I think you must think about the following. And I have had people extremely upset and extremely angry for even mentioning this, right? And the only reason I'm mentioning it is we're trying to understand the mechanism here, the mechanism for the criminal psychology. And so the question is, it's a question. You can either say, no, I don't think that that's an issue at all. Well, then you can play this a couple of times until you do think it's an issue. And you might say, yeah, maybe it's a little bit of an issue. Or you might say, maybe there is something there. And this is the question. Do you agree that the disconnection he has in the real world of his student life is pretty damn disconnected? He's awake all night, much like I am. I mean, but he doesn't have a dog, and he doesn't have people that are regulars, seemingly in his life. But there's this idea that he seems to bear grudge against this very society that he finds himself in. Don't you get that sense? Everyone's having fun, everyone's living their lives, and he's not. Does he like that? But what I'm trying to get at is his disconnection just, he's a little bit disconnected, or is he very disconnected from society? In other words, think about other words for that. Ostracized, alienated, humiliated. I'm not necessarily saying someone is trying to humiliate him, but he perceives where he is as something that's humiliating. He perceives his loneliness, that just the continuous loneliness that just doesn't stop, as humiliating. He perceives this constant singledom where he just can't get a girlfriend as humiliating. He perceives this thing where everyone's got friends and it's so normal and so natural and so easy, and yet for him it's this pride swallowing siege, right? All you've got to do is rate that amount of disconnection, that amount of being fragmented and not being part of whatever, the student body, part of the student society, part of the fun and games at university. Rank that and say, is he at like number 1 extremely apart, or is he at number 10 extremely part of and parcel of all of these activities, right? And anyone who can spend 12 separate nights driving around, looking at, I guess, complete strangers and getting upset about it, seems like someone who's not particularly connected. But here's the bottom line. In your own mind, perform a rating for how disconnected this person is from his society that he's supposed to be connected to. And bear in mind, the whole college situation is a society. It's a group of people. It's much bigger than a school situation. I think is it 12,000 people or 8,000 people at the University of Idaho? That's a lot of people. Lots of groups, lots of clubs, lots of gatherings. Are you part of that? Or are you constantly a part of that, apart? So you make your one assessment there. You know what? I think he was very separated from that world. Then you take that entire thing and you compare it to his family life, and you say, did he have like a normal family life? Yeah, his mom and dad like him, his sister likes him. The fact that his mother breaks down in tears, I don't even think that happened at the Chris Watts trial. I think his mother was there. I don't think that even happened. She testified and you know, she made a statement, and she was a little bit overcome with, but she didn't break down. That he stopped the entire trial, the sentencing. So what this seems to indicate are very strong relationships. And what's the first thing he does after this incident? Well, he and his father go back home, right? That's where he goes. He doesn't go somewhere else. He goes home. What's the first thing Brian Laundrie did? Well, he went home. Did Brian Laundrie have very strong relationships with his parents? Did his parents have very strong relationships with him? So you need to see that as a, what do you call it? A continuum, right? And you may disagree with me, but just think about this thought. Is the amount of disconnection with the real world related to the amount of connection to his family? In other words, if he's less connected to his family, bear in mind, you go to college to screw around, meet new people, and you know, spread your wings and live the rest of your life. You go to college to become an adult, to become someone, to not be a child, to not be with mommy and daddy, to begin your great adventure. And what is happening with 28-year-old Koberger is, after this incident, he goes with daddy home. It's very sweet, but what's actually going on behind the scenes? When the officer, and I still want to deal with this, when the officer asks them, you know, what's going on, and his father answers, you get a sense that he really resents his father giving that information. He would rather that his father doesn't volunteer where he's from or where they're going. You kind of get that impression. So at the same time that he's got a great relationship with his dad, you also get the sense that there's a kind of dependency going on there, and one that he in a way resents himself, right? So do you see what I'm trying to say? Is there a continuum where if he was less connected to his parents and his family, then he would be more connected to his world? And I don't know what the answer is. If you can't get more connected to your world, do you then just revert back to your family? If you can't connect to the world, what are you supposed to do? Don't you call mom and dad for help? What is mom and dad supposed to do? Nisi says parents cannot be all that one has. The other thing that you should talk about is, how can you be a heroin addict for 4 years, right? It's just a question. You can answer that yourself. How can one be a heroin addict in your 20s for 4 years? And then the question is, what does mom and dad do about that? What do they do about that? Also, why has someone become a heroin addict? Is it because of a failure to launch? What's the source of that unhappiness? Are they unhappy at home, or are they unhappy in the real world? Are they treating the anxiety of the world with heroin, or are they treating the anxiety of the family with heroin? What's that all about? But I think you've also got to ask the question, to be able to actually do that for 4 years when you're in your 20s, who's actually paying for his studies? What is paying for his studies? Okay, so now I'm going to just play the part where you hear about his mother crying, right?
So hard, the court brings over Kleenex, because at this point the whole family is very emotional. I hear her, but she was crying so hard. The court brings over Kleenex, because at this point the whole family is very emotional, and the whole family, they're taking the Kleenex. But after that, then he signed the extradition papers, and then it was almost official. But one thing that the defense attorney wanted to put on the record, which was very interesting, that the chief public defender of...
Okay, so that's really the part I want to emphasize, is just how the family are so emotional to hear what has happened to their baby, their brother, their son, that it brings the whole court to a standstill, right? And so that brings up a really interesting question, which is, wasn't Koberger like a golden boy to his family? In other words, his father's a maintenance worker, his mother's I think a substitute teacher. Wasn't he like the golden boy? I think he's the only son in the family. And here he is, he's studying his doctorate. Don't they feel proud of him and think that he's this incredible kid, right? In the same way that Scott Peterson was treated as the golden boy of that family, in the same way that Chris Watts was treated as the golden boy of that family. Now, what happens when your family think you are totally awesome? You are the best thing that has ever come out of this family. You are your mother's pride and joy. You are your father's, your father idolizes you, right? And that's a great feeling, but actually in the real world, you're a golden boy at home, but when you go out to where you work, people scoff and don't really like you, and that golden boy thing isn't there. What is that disconnect? I mean, there's a disconnect in that perception. What does that disconnect feel like? Mommy loves you, but no girls seem to even like you. Dad thinks you're awesome, but other guys don't really want to spend that much time with you. What does that feel like? And don't you sort of feel like someone's got to be to blame because I'm in this weird, what's the word? Limbo. I'm in this weird limbo where nothing's really happening. I'm awesome, but nobody really realizes it. What's going on with that? Like, who's to blame for that? Because there are really only two possibilities. Either I'm to blame for my limbo, or you to blame for my limbo. But I'm doing the best that I can. I'm doing my doctorate. I've pulled myself by my bootstraps out of my situation. Yeah, but I'm still in limbo. So whose fault can it be? Who else's fault can it be except somebody else's? And so that is exactly it. He's living a social death. And every time he sees someone laughing and loving and hugging and kissing, you know, like students do, walking hand in hand, it reinforces the disaster that his social life actually is. Thanks a lot, Lisa. So can you see how it's not just I'm not really very happy at university. It's the contrast of that to, but mom and dad think I'm the best thing since sliced bread. But so why don't you? They accept me, why don't you? And bear in mind, there's a big culture shock coming from the sales, which is quite conservative, I believe, to the, I think, far more liberal Idaho. There's a big contrast there. And the challenge is, can you be fluid? Can you be flexible? Can you go with the flow? Can you open your mind? Can you try something new? Can you be open-minded and open-hearted? But what happens when you do that and people don't really like you, or you don't carry that off properly? There isn't any tendency then to go into a soldier mode. I was open, but now I'm closed. I did make myself vulnerable. Now I've got to do something else. I did try, and now I'm not going to try. Now I've got some other strategy. And I also think what's really interesting is he's 28 years old, right? The murder suspect is 28 years old. The victims are 20 and 21. Isn't that saying something in just a general sense, that is angry about lost youth, or is angry about something that he maybe feels he deserved in terms of that youth setting? Look at what car you're driving. Look at what life you're living. Look how much you have. Look how little I had. You don't have any struggles. You don't have any difficulties. Look at what situation I've got. And I mean, don't laugh, but just in terms of my YouTube journey, I've got a chip on my shoulder given how hard I've had to work, right? And how easy some people have had it. They've had just this easy ride. Of course, they do certain things that makes their ride easier. But I'm doing I'm working, they're working, but they get this easy ride. So it's exactly that kind of feeling. In the same way, when you look at Maddie's Pinterest about what I deserve, which is in a way a healthy thing. That same magical thinking about I deserve better, I deserve this, I deserve that. You may be on the other side of that, where your life's miserable and you say, I don't deserve this, and it's your fault. In other words, Maddie may be saying her life is wonderful, her life is perfect, and this is what I deserve, right? I'm getting exactly what I deserve, right? Well, as long as you're in that fairy tale. But do you think Maddie deserved what ultimately happened to her? Obviously not. But that is exactly what I think the murder suspect here was thinking. I don't deserve this life. I don't deserve the social death. You don't deserve to be this happy. And I don't deserve to be this unhappy. And so I'm going to do something about it. Does that make sense? Does that resonate with you, the criminal psychology? So do you remember we spoke very early, before we knew the suspect, before we even got his name or his face, we said it's someone who is emasculated and entitled. Do you remember that? So is he emasculated? Are you getting a sense of how he is emasculated? How is he emasculated? And then on the other side, how is he entitled? Does he get some of that sense of entitlement, what I deserve, from his family, from his parents, maybe even from society? You deserve to be happy. You deserve to get the American dream. Everyone deserves whatever, whatever, whatever. And so when you don't get what you deserve, what are you supposed to do then? someone says, I wouldn't call Idaho liberal, but the question isn't whether you would, it's whether he would, right? And that's very important to bear in mind in true crime. This is never about what you would do in that situation. This is about this person getting to know this person, what they would do. It's not about whether you've got overprotective parents or whether you're an overprotective parent or whether whatever. The question is, what are the dynamics in his life? How does he deal with them? And how does that mechanism work, right? Don't make it personal about you. You know, often in like the John Benet Ramsey case, you see people projecting father issues, mommy issues, and other issues onto the characters in the John Benet Ramsey case. You're not thinking about the John Benet Ramsey case, you're thinking about your own relationships with family members. That's not the way to deal with true crime. You can come back to that once you've figured it out, but don't try and figure it out through your own experience, figure it out through their experience. Walk in their shoes. Nobody wants to do that. Everyone wants to say, criminals are nothing like us. They're psychopaths. There's no dynamics. They just did something. No, there's a story there. We're interested in that story. Thanks a lot, Flower Goddess. Nice name. That's a cool statement. So I'm going to play another clip. Where is it from? Yeah, this is just Koberger entering. Now, what I want you to do, and again, you might say, Jeepers, this isn't very deep analysis. This is superficial. You're judging a book by its cover. It's simply taking what we've spoken about now. Are we dealing with someone who feels emasculated? Are we dealing with someone who's sensitive? Are we dealing with someone who's intelligent, but who misinterprets all of that and feels entitled to something, and that leads to a chip on his shoulder? Are we dealing with someone who can't fit in, who's an oddball, who has been so mollycoddled by his family that once he's not with his family, he doesn't know who to be? And he's either bullied or he bullies someone else. In other words, he has a false sense of confidence based on a certain amount of, let's call it overexposure to family. And I don't think I'm being judgmental when I say that. When I was a teenager, my mother wouldn't let me watch Dallas. So somebody write that down, and you can insult me with that one till the end of time. But my mother was also very overprotective. And she basically, when I was 17 years old, I think, she wouldn't let me watch Dallas because she thought it would be a very bad influence, or she thought it was too extreme for innocent young minds, right? And so I certainly found when I went into the real world, I found myself somewhat, because a lot of your decisions are taken out of your hands. And then when someone says, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that? Well, you haven't actually thought about it because it's been parented for you, right? You get what I'm saying? And so doing things like going overseas and living overseas, which I've done, can be quite a, not only a wake-up call, but it can be quite a kind of a rite of passage where you, your learning curve kind of goes like this. South Korea was incredible. Like, wow, this is a totally different culture. I'm totally unprepared for it, right? That's in a way the shock of coming out of your family culture unprepared, that there is another world out there, right? So when I'm going to play this clip, and what I want you to think is about what we've spoken about and whether this seems to fit the individual that you're going to see in this picture. Does it fit? Does it not fit?
Suspect Brian Koberger allegedly dumped trash into the garbage cans of his parents' neighbors as he hid evidence linking him to the 4 Idaho student murders. FBI agents watching his parents' home in Pennsylvania reportedly saw Koberger wearing surgical gloves and go house to house at 4 a.m. with garbage bags.
The agents immediately.
So when Koberger is at home and he's running around with surgical gloves and so on, don't you think he feels comfortable enough to do that because, well, mom and dad think I'm a hero, that they're never gonna, I can't set a foot wrong, right? No matter what I do, they're gonna love me. But it's the inverse of that at university. No matter what I do, they're gonna hate me or they're not gonna accept me.
Not be the slam dunk everyone thinks it is.
The defense is going to bring up the fact that his phone was not in the area and did not ping.
Famed defense attorney Mark Garrigo says,
okay, I thought there would be a bit more footage of him walking around. But did you, sorry, I didn't actually even have it open. Let me play it again, sorry.
Koberger allegedly dumped trash into the
The murder weapon?
Legal experts say the evidence in the case.
I don't know why that jumped back.
Legal experts say the evidence in the.
So when you look at that, just that look in his eyes, can you see that there's uncertainty there? Have you seen that moment where he greets his lawyer? It's a very, very quick smile, and then the smile's completely gone the next moment. In other words, he's not a confidence trickster. He's not a suave, charming, cool, calm, collected, calculating dude. He's a nervous person who lives in a psychological world of his own making. Right? Design Studio says, he told me he's anxious. What does that mean? That is a good, that's a good thing. That's well said. So I want you to think about those words and what need does he serve by killing? This is the murder suspect, according to the authorities, in the quadruple murders of 4 20 and 21-year-olds, right? 2 20-year-olds and 2 21-year-olds. What need does he serve by killing? Brittany says recognition is the first word that comes to mind. You're on the right track, but it's more extreme than that. It's more extreme than just recognition. If he wanted recognition, he may have written a certain kind of paper or something like that. This is a crime that is sending a particular message. What do you think it's sending? It's kind of a statement that is sent to the people of Moscow. It's a statement. What do you think that statement is trying to say? And let me go back to the question that leads up to that one. What is he trying hardest to demonstrate through what he's studying and all that kind of thing? What is he trying very, very hard to demonstrate? And we actually know the answer to that because people have said that. People who know him have said what he tends to do. But knowing that, can you get to the simple core of it? What is he trying to do? What is he trying so hard to do? Now, bear in mind, When he's at home with the family, he's succeeded in that. They think he's great. They think he's awesome. My son's studying his PhD. Wow. But somehow that's not translating where he is. T-Boss says, do you think he could have been sexually? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's the case. But I do think there's emasculation, which is a kind of sexual narrative, which is I'm not as sexually potent as I want to be because I'm not having a sexual adventure. Everyone around me is having a sexual adventure. I'm not. What does that mean? Does that mean I'm a potent, powerful figure, or does it mean the opposite? Does it mean I'm celebrating this wonderful adventure? Or does it mean I'm struggling through I'm slogging through a struggle where everyone else is getting what they deserve? Why am I not getting what I deserve? Don't I deserve to be happy? If I can't be happy, then I'm not gonna allow you to be happy, right? Okay. Gwen says it serves his need for power and control. Nisi says to pretend his life is great. Stephanie says he wanted to leave others powerless. Why? Why does he want to do that? So the thing that I'm trying to sort of direct your attention to is it's not enough in true crime to have a sort of an idea of what we're talking about. What separates the men from the boys, the folks who know what they're talking about from those who don't, is you're able to look at the same set of information and eloquently and accurately assess it and say, this is what fits as a diagnosis of this person in terms of their motive and everything. In other words, it's a very great, big, integrated equation that integrates all of these dynamics and the individual and his personality and his situation, all of that. And it brings it all together in something that is very, very simple, like E equals MC squared. In other words, it's not a iffy, general, fuzzy answer. It's a very specific answer, but it's also a very simple answer. So to the question, what is he trying hardest to demonstrate? There's a very, very simple answer, and it's very specific to this person. And once you hear it, you'll say, Cheapers, that's true. Then you go on to the next one, because he doesn't succeed in this thing that he's trying to demonstrate, which leads to the crime. And because he doesn't succeed, what need does he serve by killing? And then that is also a specific answer which touches on the previous answer, but it's also beyond that. And it's not something very, very general, like, well, he wants to be happy. Yes, he does, but so does everybody. It's not something very general, like he's jealous. Yes, he is, but so is everybody. It's very specific, and it's going through all of those various possibilities to the one that is by far the most significant. And the best way to deal with that is through what Hannibal Lecter says, how do we begin to covet, and what are we coveting? What is he coveting? What is he coveting above all? What is he coveting that causes him to commit a crime? That's your answer. But you know what that answer is. Can you say it in one word and it's the right word? So I'll be dealing with that in a follow-up episode. Since we've got a bit of time, do you guys want me to go through the 10 highlights mentioned by the New York Times? Do you guys want me to go on? Someone says he just wants attention. Someone says he wants popularity. Someone says he wants to be known. All of that's part of the thing. It's part of the thing. Self-esteem is quite a good one. Importance. You guys are all on the right track, but it's crystallizing it to one thing above all other things. Now, what's quite interesting is in all high-profile crimes, they say, all crimes are committed either for money or for sex, right? This is one of those crimes that is kind of those things, but it's something else. It's a psychological crime. Money, I think, is a factor in the sense that he comes from a certain background that's different to the people around him. So money, I think, is a factor. I mean, he didn't, the person who committed this crime didn't break in and steal money or laptops or watches or cell phones. Nevertheless, money is a factor. But in a cultural sense, in a sense of privilege, in a sense of entitlement, right? In a sense of being jealous about what opportunities some people have, right? In terms of sex, is sex a factor? It's a factor, but I mean, he didn't, there's no essay here. He's not committing it because he was in a relationship with someone, but because he wasn't. And so those factors are factors, but in a less direct way than what we used to. I disagree with the psychiatrist earlier who said he's had a personal relationship with them. No, he's had a much more fraught relationship in some other way. It's in terms of his background versus their background, his life right here and now versus their life right here and now, right? Okay, so I'm going to go to the New York Times article. Shall we take it a bit further?
Case seems to be overwhelming.
You have a very powerful piece of DNA evidence.
Okay. Are you guys happy for me to continue 10 key revelations in the Idaho murder case? Happy for me to continue, or do you want me to wrap up? Do you guys want to go to bed? Uncle Benny says, why don't you just say what the word is? Because I'm going to be putting it together in its own analysis. Also, because I want you to think about it. Not right now. I want you to sleep on it. I want you to dwell on it. I want you to turn on your critical thinking engines and get those gears rolling. I want you to think about, could it be this? Could it be that? I want you to try and feel your way intuitively, but also through the facts, through your observations, to what is the answer. I want you to do that as an exercise, right? Does that make sense? So I'm gonna answer the question, but I want to do it in its own separate thing where you bring it all together. Kelly says inclusion. Silo says validation. Validation in the Oscar Pistorius case was a huge theme. It's also big here, but it's actually something else here. Okay, so let's continue. So I'm just going to quickly go through what the New York Times has emphasized here. They talk about a roommate who saw a masked man. We've gone through that, so I'm not really going to touch on that too much. So it does say in the New York Times, she reported locking her own bedroom door at that point, but it's unclear from the records what transpired afterwards. Yeah, what did happen after that? Why were authorities only summoned to the scene more than 7 hours later? If she locked her own bedroom door, if she was concerned about her own safety, what about the safety of other people in the house? And surely she could hear the dog barking. Didn't she think that meant something? We know about that. Found a knife sheath at the scene. How about that? The suspect applied to work at the local police department. Now, what do you think about that? Do you think that's where he intended to work long term? Do you think that he intended to become a cop? Do you think he intended to become like a expert that testifies at trial? What do you think the situation is? And it's quite an interesting question because his family are kind of like, is it blue collar workers? Always get confused. I think it's blue collar. Yeah, so sort of working class. So wouldn't a cop be the right kind of setup for him? And who knows, maybe he would have actually had a good be in the sort of company of friends in a way if he was there. The other thing about him applying to work at the local police department may be that he wanted the inside track on what they knew given the investigation. I'm not sure if I believe that, but I suppose it's possible. Someone says here he wanted a double life. I think it's the opposite. I think he didn't want a double life. He wanted the life that he couldn't have. He was living a double life ultimately, but he didn't want a double life. He ultimately perhaps accepted that. But don't you agree that he wanted a different life? He didn't want the double life. He eventually gave in to that. So do you guys know what the answer is to this? He applied to work at the local police department. Was he rejected? Was he accepted? What happened there? It says here, he applied for an internship with the Pullman Police Department in the fall of 2022. So did he get that position? Now, do you guys remember in the Dahmer case, Dahmer believed that he was born to be a criminal, and the Dahmer thing came out like last year. One wonders whether Koberger or whoever committed this crime was influenced by that, this idea that it's sort of deterministic, that it's your fate to be this, that you were born a certain way, and that you've just got to live out that whatever it is, right? Mel says, I don't know. I don't think he did. Bear in mind, you are part of the true crime community. Well, like it or not, so was he. He was studying, like he was literally studying true crime. So someone who's studying true crime, do you think he wouldn't have paid attention to all the most top of mind cases? That's true. He wanted to keep people with him. But did you notice in the Dahmer case, Dahmer was very close to his father as well, relative to everybody else in his life. Dahmer had a good relationship with his dad, and then not a really good relationship with literally everybody else. What's the other thing with Dahmer that I wanted to point out here? Dahmer also felt like he was drawn like a magnet, like he was being tempted. He had fantasies, and he was trying to resist that. And don't you kind of get the sense that the perpetrator in this case had a similar thing, that he was drawn to this idea and basically felt that that is his destiny? Didn't you get that sense? That he had this idea in his mind for a really long time, and it started to own him. It started to become a dark fairy tale of deliverance, right? Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, looks like you didn't get it. Okay, so the next one, a car passed the victim's house several times. So I'm going to provide you guys with a spoiler for the acoustics video that I uploaded just before I made this one. But before I do, let me ask you guys a question. Let me go to the comments so I can see what you guys are saying. Jackie says, are any of your books going to be available on Audible? Jackie, I've got quite a few. I've got about 20 books, 21 books, I think, available where I have narrated them on Patreon. They're on the $5 tier and the $10 tier. So 20 books on Chris Watts, John Benet Ramsey, Madeleine McCann, Scott Peterson, and so on and so on and so on. So let me ask this question a second time. Where is 112 King Road? Let's see if you guys know the answer. Do you guys know where 1112 King Road is? This was the camera that recorded the audio. Do you guys know where that is? Patricia says, do you think you took a trophy item? No, I don't. So where relative to the house is 1112 King Road? And you can also describe the house if you like. But basically, what's your answer? Where is 1112 King Road? That's right, but tell me. Yes, that's also right. Opposite the house here. To the right of 1122, yeah. Verbal Judah says, I like your audiobooks because you have a, thanks a lot for that. So that's, I think, one of the best answers. It's right next door. 1112, despite what Google Maps says, it's not across the road and down the road and on the corner. It's actually right next door. Basically, the closest house to 1122 King Road is 1112 King Road, right? Do you remember Plunder put up that body cam showing someone who'd broken into a car, right? A brunette girl that sort of came out, and the house was just through like a channel. That house was through like a channel to the next house. That is 1112 King Road. That is literally where the camera was that overheard those sounds, right? Did you guys know that? Also, did you know that the camera was installed at 1112 King Road just after March 2022? So basically about 3 months before Koberger arrived in Washington. The neighbor to 1122 King Road installed a Ring doorbell camera. That has proven to be of vital significance to this case, because not only did that camera pick up crucial sounds, and that gives us time of death, that camera also picked up the movement of a vehicle right past that house as well. What's the other thing to note regarding that? the other thing to note is, didn't the perpetrator, this criminal mastermind, this genius, notice that there's a camera literally right next door to the house that he wanted to target? In other words, he visits the crime scene, the crime scene to be 12 times. Does he not realize there's a camera on the house right next door? That's it. That's the answer. Did you guys know that? That there's a camera right next door. And that's the camera that heard the sounds coming out of Xana's room, because it was literally a couple of feet away. Erika says, I think the DoorDash guy shocked him. You know what is possible? That he was in the house on his way upstairs when the DoorDash guy actually came in. In other words, it's possible that in the middle of him committing a crime, someone else delivered some food. I'm saying it's possible. Maybe that is not what happened. I suppose the DoorDash guy would know better than anyone. But you would imagine that the DoorDash guy's vehicle and the Elantra were there either at the same time or very close to the same time. In any event, it was a very near miss. Absolutely. Can you imagine? So, in terms of this whole idea of this slick assassin, this cool, calm, deadly assassin, well, he drove to and from the house 4 times ultimately. I mean, if you don't want to be seen, that's not a very good way of going about it. And if you look at how embedded that house is, virtually in a cul-de-sac. If you look at how embedded 1122 King Road is, you've got to go through all sorts of under other homes and around other homes into a little bit of a labyrinth, right? And you're going to not only do that, you're going to do it 4 times. And then you're going to come back to the crime scene afterwards, apparently, according to the affidavit. Doesn't that show an absolute amateur, someone who's really haphazard in their thinking? Also, can he not keep himself away from the crime scene? If you add it all up together, it's 5 visits to the crime scene, probably within 24 hours. But you want to get away with the crime you're committing. You don't want anyone to see you. You don't want anyone to see your vehicle. You don't want anyone to see a Pennsylvania license plate. That's not really the way to go about it. Janine says a blue house. Yeah, it's kind of a blue house just around the corner. Shall I put up a link to that? I think I need to just open up another link here. So this is just a bit of a spoiler. It's not that house. It's basically, I think, this house, or it's slightly to the left of this house. So it's not, this is not 1112 King Road. It's this house. This is 1112 King Road. Did you know that? Let's see if I can get a better image. I don't think I've got one. Yeah, I don't have it. There are some better images in the actual photo. I suppose this is probably the best image, this one, if I just reduce it slightly. Right. So 1112 King Road is not that house, even though Google Maps says it is. It's actually this house. And this is the crime scene. So it's literally that distance from Xana's room to, well, the camera's on that side, as far as I know. I don't know if there's a camera there, but the camera's on the other side by the front door. And you can actually see some of that up close in one news video and the other one in Plunder's video. I'll put a link to that in the description. Is there a top view of the house? Well, the view behind me is sort of a top view. That's the top view of the house. Sorry. Over. How do I do this? That. Why is this so hard? That's the top view of the house. Can you see that? Cynthia says that the DoorDash person showed up after the murders. The DoorDash person showed up at 4:12. No. I think, what time did the DoorDash person show up? As far as I know, about 4 o'clock. And then she was on a TikTok at 4:12 and the crime happened at 4:17. But let me confirm that. Let's have a look. DoorDash. Good question. Just get certainty on it. Yeah, so there we have it. Can you see? Kernodle received a DoorDash order at about 4 o'clock. Law enforcement identified the DoorDash delivery driver, reported that. So that happened at about 4 o'clock. And then she was on TikTok at about 4:12 and the crime happened at 4:17. But you've got to ask, if she got the order at 4 o'clock, wouldn't it have taken about 5 or 10 minutes to eat the food and maybe take some of the leftovers to the kitchen? Okay, so let's go back to that New York Times piece. Where is it? So the suspect vehicle was seen driving around at about 4:04 a.m. And it left the area at 4:20 a.m. So that gives you an idea. The crime took around about 10-15 minutes to execute and complete. It may sound like a short time, but that is quite a long time to be doing what was happening. It's quite a long time to be in someone's house under those circumstances. Audio captured a dog barking. Why did the person who said he heard a scream not hear dog barking? It's a very clear noise, and it says here a dog can be heard barking numerous times starting at 4:17 a.m. So why did the person who said he heard a scream not say he heard a dog barking? Also, why does this security camera record everything except a scream? It says distorted audio, what sounded like voices, a whimper followed by a thud. There's no scream in this. So do you believe the witness who said he heard a scream? One of the victims may have been awake. So do you remember throughout this narrative we've been told that everyone was asleep and everyone was killed in their beds? That wasn't true. And one of the victims heard everything and still didn't call 911 for 7 hours. Oh, hang on. One of the victims may have been awake. Yeah, so they're saying Xana. I think they should say at least one of the victims may have been awake. So if the crime was committed at 17 minutes past 4, the fact that Zana got a DoorDash order, she got up, went to the door, got the order at 4 o'clock, and then 12 minutes later she was still on her phone, means the killer didn't even absolutely make sure that everyone was asleep, because it looks like he ran out of patience. Did you know that? A campus officer found Koberger's car. It was as simple as someone at Pullman just was wandering around. They were told, we're looking for a Hyundai Elantra. Well, then they found one. So here it says, and they found it on November 25th. Less than 2 weeks later, Moscow Police Department asked law enforcement agencies to be on the lookout for a white Hyundai Elantra in the area. 4 days later, at about 12:28, a WSU police officer, is it Daniel Tiengo, queried white Elantras registered at WSU. As a result of that query, he located a 2015 white Elantra. Already November 29. Koberger's phone disconnected during the killings. That's a little bit of a unclear sort of, not headline, but it's a kind of an unclear way to express that. Anyway, let's read what it says here. At 2:47, the phone stops reporting to the network, which means it was either on airplane mode or it had been turned off at 2:47 a.m. So what that suggests is at shortly before 3 o'clock in the morning, someone decided this is it. This is the day. This is the moment. I'm now going to get dressed. I'm going to turn my phone off. I'm going to get in my car. I'm going to drive there. I've got my knife with me. And I'm going to do something. And he's so determined that he drives there 4 separate times. And then he comes back afterwards. It says here, the phone is either turned off or the connection to the network is disabled, such as airplane mode. And I always say in true crime, the absence of evidence is also evidence. You have it also in the Summer Wells case. Phones go off at a sudden time. Why? Why during that particular window is your phone off? To me, that's also one of the biggest red flags in true crime, is just that thing of what time did the crime happen? What time did the crime happen? And then what was the status of your phone at that exact time? I think it's one of the biggest, it's one of the key things that, one of the first questions Ali must determine in terms of a suspect. Yeah, that's right. Okay, next one. The police suggest that the suspect may have returned to the crime scene. Yeah, that. Do you remember social media was saying that they thought they saw a vehicle going by? Do you remember when I covered that, I also said, well, you can actually easily drive by on the road. What is it? Is it Watanoga or something? The road coming around the side. You can easily drive down there slowly and get a glance right through the trees, because that house stands so, it's so visible. It's so tall and so visible. And the window is so big that you can see right into it from, you can have this sort of penetrating line of sight from so many different vantage points. A DNA sample was taken from the trash in Pennsylvania. We do know that. Did you know that Koberger actually collected the trash, put it in a bag, went out at 4 o'clock in the morning. I think he was wearing surgical gloves, and deposited it in the neighbor's trash. This is not in the affidavit, by the way. And it was almost like the cops who were doing surveillance in the middle of the night in the cold at around about Christmas time were like, well, thanks for providing us with that entertainment. Thanks for like doing something, because we were just sitting here with nothing to do. Oh, and thanks also for collecting the what you did, the stuff you're trying to get rid of. I think we'll take that and we'll test it. And so guess what happened? They got his father's DNA. Thanks a lot, Benzo. Appreciate it. Terry says, could that be consciousness of guilt? So how do you explain that? How do you explain why were you doing that at 4 o'clock in the morning? No, well, I'm an insomniac. Do you normally take out the garbage at 4 in the morning and put it with your neighbor? Yeah, but the garbage collector doesn't always collect our garbage. Oh, is that the reason? Okay. Is that it? That is it. That is it. So can you see in this headline here, suspect linked to crime scene by phone and DNA? Let me ask you guys a question. Do you think the suspect is linked to any of the victims in the ways that we imagined? In other words, was he having a relationship with Kaylee? Was he having a relationship with Maddie? Did he know Xana? Was he having a kind of relationship of some kind with any of the victims, in your opinion? Thanks a lot, Michelle. So far, all of you are saying no. It didn't look like he had a relationship with any of them. Doesn't that already tell you something quite insightful about him? That it wasn't as though he went to a party and then he couldn't get back in. Maybe he did, but it doesn't appear to be the case. It doesn't appear that anyone knew him in that house. And it wasn't that the problem, was that nobody knew him. Yep. Isn't that already giving you a very clear idea of the social power of the victims versus the absolute lack of social power of the perpetrator here? You get that sense? Think about it again. The absolute social power. Now think about this person looking from the outside, just seeing how happy, how much fun, like literally how much fun, 4 or 5 days a week, for hours and hours on end. No matter what time you go there, they're still partying. They're having such rip-roaring parties, it's leading to noise complaints. There's laughter, there's sex, there's fun, there's friendship, there's food, there's everything. There's adventure. There's, I'm living my life and this is the best life ever, right? And on the other side of that is someone who is having none of that, who's in a desert of despair and loneliness and absolutely nothing happening, misery. And so when he looks at this misery, and it's like got like a title above it, good vibes, what do you think he feels? And the answer is bad vibes. And the more he sees the good vibes, the more he feels the bad vibes. That's right. What's wrong with me? This isn't fair. Absolutely. Okay, do I have anything else I want to show you? Yeah, I think there's one more thing I want to show you. I actually didn't think I'd get this far. Okay. Some of you aren't going to like this. So let's just do that. How many of you guys have seen this? This is purportedly a picture of him smiling. How many of you have seen this image? Yeah. How many of you think that this image is not fake? How many of you think, no, he was actually smiling? I don't know if you guys remember, I've actually put up a video describing him as someone who can't smile. You virtually never see him smile, right? So I actually found this on Twitter, and I'm not going to say who put it up, and it's not to protect that person, it's to protect me from that person. But that person wrote the following: what is this? I'm getting this in my inbox and I'm wondering what the source is. Is it edited? Or is he literally smiling for mugshot time? In other words, it's being posed rhetorically. Could this be the quadruple murderer literally smiling for the mugshot? In other words, I don't actually know what I'm seeing here. Could it be this? Could it be that? Or is it somebody who's smiling for a mugshot, right? Now, this is the problem I've got with this particular thing. When this came out, this image of him smiling, it was literally at the most serious point. And what I'm saying now, I'm being deadly serious when I say this. When this image came out, when it was posted, and there were other images even weirder than this also posted at the same time, it was at the most serious point in this investigation. He'd just been extradited and he was about to face the charges, and the affidavit was about to come out. In other words, they were about to say what they thought happened in terms of the crime scene, and they were about to say what the facts were in this case. So it's basically the most serious moment up in the investigation up until this point, right? Where we're about to find out who the perpetrator is according to law enforcement, what he's done, and all the circumstances around the crime scene. In other words, this is a very serious moment. Arguably, it's the most serious moment we've had thus far in the trial. And what happens? Let's have fun. Let's have fun with fake news. Let's speculate on whether the perpetrator was smiling at the camera. Let's make that our analysis. Could he have been smiling? Could this be photoshopped? Could it be this way? Could it be that way? I don't know. I don't know whether it was photoshopped, but let's kind of have fun with the idea. At the moment that we want to deal with the facts, where somebody's been caught and his life is about to be changed forever, potentially, about somebody who changed 4 other people's lives forever and their families. At the moment that we're going to look at this person, we're actually even going to fake who he is. And you're probably going to have a few people who actually believe that he was smiling. And they're going to say, you know what, he's smiling at the camera, and but that's not what he did. Someone's manufacturing that to turn it into fun entertainment at the most serious time. And then the question is, literally, why are you turning the most serious moment in a very serious case, a quadruple homicide, where we're about to learn the facts, into this fun game of look at the perpetrator smiling at the camera when he wasn't. Oh, I didn't really know that. I wasn't sure. I thought I would ask you. Really, you didn't know that? That was my first thought. That was my thought as well. And so can you see how what this does is it contaminates your idea of who a person is in the name of having fun and being popular and making something interesting to talk about while you're waiting for the information to come through. Do you think it's right? Thanks a lot, Jane. Do you think it's right to do that? This is the booking photo of this particular criminal, and it's a moment to get a look at his face, how he presents himself, but now we're going to distort that as well. We're going to have fun with that. Let's have fun with the murderer's face. And Terry actually told me about this. I'd seen it anyway, but she also shared her thoughts about it. That is, I think, one way that this channel differentiates itself from a lot of other channels. I'm sure it's very popular, and I'm sure there was a lot of chatter, and some people enjoyed that, and it was really interesting, and it was fun. True crime shouldn't be about fun when people's lives are devastated, right? An entire town is traumatized, right? And people are trying to get closure and deal with the reality of lives literally being torn apart, right? But then for some people, it's just a sideshow, it's a circus. It's a way to amuse yourself. I don't like it. I really don't like it. I really don't like it. That's how I feel. And you might say, if you're the person doing this and you're sitting on the other side, you might say, how's that any different to you calling the criminal a mastermind in a sarcastic way? It is slightly different, because isn't that what the criminal thinks of himself as a mastermind? And doesn't he deserve, to some extent, to be criticized for that idea of himself and what he ends up doing with that idea of himself, right? Right. So you might say, wow, what a hypocrite you are. You've done exactly the same thing. You're making fun of the perpetrator. Yeah, through the fabric of this case. I'm not distorting who he is by putting a smile on his face in a photo when that's not actually what he looks like, and then pretending I don't know whether it's a real photo or not, right? Like, I will never do that. I'll never put up fake news and say, I don't really know whether this is fake or not, right? In the video I've just put up, I actually started that video thinking 1112 King Road was the greenhouse at the bottom of the road. When I was starting to make that video, what's going on here? And maybe this is a sign to get off. Shall I lean forward? Yeah, so when I made that video, at the beginning of making that video, I was actually under the impression that 1112 King Road was the greenhouse on the corner, because that's what Google Maps showed. You go to 1112 King Road and you can't find any cameras there. And so through the course of putting that video together, editing it, getting all the footage, I actually realized, wow, jeepers, 1112 King Road is right next door, right? And so it would be wrong of me to put the video up about 1112 King Road and not address what I know not to be the case. In other words, even though I'd put the script up, I could have just left it the way it was. It was such a great narrative. Unfortunately, it's not actually true. 1112 King Road is not the house on the corner, right? There's no camera there. There is a camera on 1112 King Road, the house right next door. I put together such a great script about how sound waves move and so on. But it would be irresponsible of me to lie to you, essentially, but well, it's basically a mistake, but to push that mistake just because I made something that is inconvenient to me, right? In other words, you need to have the discipline and the sort of seriousness where you say facts matter, details matter, being accurate matters. Being flippant with information isn't right. Playing fun and games and speculating and it's all a big joke, but don't worry, I'm popular and that's all that matters. Not in true crime. You could go and do it with something else, not with true crime, not where people's lives are destroyed and you turning that into your own personal carry-on and you dancing on their graves, right? Even a perpetrator that you don't like and maybe is deserving of a little bit of what do you call it, making fun of. Be careful doing that, because it's humiliating a person that leads to this sort of behavior. And if you then turn your channel into an opportunity to humiliate, aren't you turning society into its own worst enemy? The thing that society is supposed to learn, you're actually perpetuating. That's probably why I thought it was the greenhouse. So I also thought it was the greenhouse. And you know what is so amazing is we are so late in this crime, and now you are figuring things out that are obvious, but you just didn't know. So, like, what are some obvious things I didn't know? I didn't know. One of the things that I read it, but I didn't register, was that the sound coming out of the house, unlike the image that you see behind me, it's not the sound coming from Maddie's room. It's a sound coming from Xana's room. That was the sound that was transferring to the camera, as well as the dog barking, which is also coming from Kaylee's room, which is closer to that side of the house, right? So, yeah, I learned where the real 1112 King Road was only now. I say that to my shame. What is the other thing that I learned? Yeah, but you can only sort of learn these things when you're paying attention. And if half of what you're doing is trying to be entertaining and fun, and it's a big festival of jokes and distortions, then how on earth do you do this properly? And then do you say, but that's not the point. It's not the point to do this properly. Isn't that the point, to investigate effectively? Isn't that the point to be effective and efficient and intelligent in trying to figure out what is going on here so that it doesn't happen again, not to be careless about it and not to be, in a way, sort of disrespectful and silly about it. And I guess the big test is, if this had to happen to you or to your family member, would you want someone dancing on your grave about it or their grave about it? Right? That's really the bottom of it. And I'm also not going to say you need to be deadly serious and never crack a smile when you're on YouTube talking about this stuff. You can, but on the other hand, the whole currency shouldn't be smiles and jokes either. So I just want to encourage the people at my channel to be serious when we're talking about serious stuff, and to, express your whatever criticism, express it where it's deserved, right? And I want to encourage those who want to be entertained and want to laugh and joke and look at things like this that's not real. At the most serious moment of a case like this, if that titillates you and excites you, please leave. Please unsubscribe right now. Go to the channel that tickles you and stay the heck away from this channel, right? I'm serious. And if you appreciate what I'm saying, that yes, you need to treat the murders of young people as serious subject matter and trying to figure out the criminal mind and, you know, things like court cases and evidence and motive as serious subject matter and not things where you almost schizophrenic about it. Today we laugh about it, tomorrow we're serious. Today we really clever and we know all the details, but tomorrow it's a joke again. No, let's be consistently have the right attitude to what we're dealing with. One of the things that I deal with in the books that I write that virtually nobody deals with, I don't see it, is I don't just deal with the case. We go into the heart and the mind of the criminal. We walk in his shoes. And nobody wants to do that because they say, no, I'm better than the criminal. The criminal is slime, is a monster, whatever name. That's how you create criminals and monsters, by labeling people, by ostracizing them, by pushing them out, and all of that stuff. If you want to understand the world and yourself and make it a better place, walk in their shoes, not in order to say, to give the perpetrator a hug or to become a supporter of the perpetrator, to simply understand almost the unfathomable. And it turns out it's not so hard to understand after all. And then what happens through that process is you actually start to understand how the world works a lot better and how some people deal with the world in ways that you actually know about already. And maybe you even deal with it. How some people deal with loneliness, how some people deal with rejection, how some people deal with broken families or families that love them but societies that don't. How people deal with the whole ebb and flow and societies. You know, if society treats you a certain way, that's reality. But you don't necessarily have to accept it, but it is reality. In the same way, YouTube may say, I don't agree with what you said here. That is reality. Even though I may feel what I said is actually true. What I've said is actually true, it's actually real. The fact that YouTube says, well, I don't believe you, I don't agree, that's a reality I've got to accept. Or I've got to deal with that as well, right? And to the extent that you deal with this calculus, how the criminal deals with his, actually is maladaptive to his situation, you realize in a way what is wrong with our society. So, and in this case, it kind of comes down to this question of what do you deserve? What do you deserve? When you're born, do you just deserve happiness, or should you work a little bit towards it? And if you don't get happiness, is it the end of the world? Do you have to have happiness right now? Is it okay if you have it a little bit further down the line? I've just had a horrible year. I broke 2 ribs. I had a bone bruise. My girlfriend and I broke up. On and on and on and on. Do you have a nervous breakdown because you're not happy right now? Or do you allow things to flow and grow and fluctuate? They fluctuate from a high to a low and a low to a high. Do you understand that seasonality of life? Or do you insist that I want to be happy right now? I deserve to be happy right now. I need to make things a certain way right now. Well, that's magical thinking. Are you aware of the process now? Things are connected. Because if you see randomness in things, that's also how criminals see things. But when you see how things are connected, you can also see your way through things. And so true crime is a wonderful opportunity to figure out the culture that we live in, where it's going, how it's going, what we don't like about it, what we can and should do about it, and how we as a community can kind of come together and learn and be edified and find a silver lining to a very dark cloud and come out the other side illuminated, enriched, rather than just entertained, rather than just some shallow giggle-faced, right? In other words, you come out of the whole thing with a very deep sense, a very deep knowledge of not only criminal behavior, but human behavior, not only of the intertextuality between criminals, but the way our society is creating dysfunctional behavior in ordinary people. You don't just have criminals that do things that aren't right. You have their victims that to some extent are doing something in our culture that either aggravates the criminal or aggravates their own lives. Maybe they go bankrupt several times, and their bankruptcies in Koberger's family, right? And so, what are the what are all of these mechanisms that we are afforded this microscopic view into? Family finances, cultural backgrounds, what's going on in Pennsylvania, what's the difference between the culture in Pennsylvania and in Idaho, what is going on with young people today, what happens when you have a party and law enforcement arrive, what is our attitude to law enforcement, what's my attitude, what's your attitude, what's the attitude of young people, is that taking us in a good direction, does law enforcement need to change? All of these are serious and important questions, right? And if you deal with them seriously, you can come out the other side with a better system all around. You can say, you know what, I have more insight into my world, my personal world, also your world, also that world. Isn't that a much better place to be than let's be superficially entertained by surfaces? Let's be instead genuinely interested in the real meat and potatoes, the real heart of these cases. So I didn't really expect I was going to do some kind of big performance. I actually thought the power was going to go out more than an hour ago, but there you have it. I did say what was on my heart, and it's actually kind of overdue. I feel like, in a way, almost the entire true crime community has given itself over to shallow, artificial bullshit analysis, and it takes itself so seriously. It's a joke, and they take themselves so seriously, and they know what they're talking about. Really? Have you studied some of this stuff at university? Have you sat in courtrooms? Have you written books or read books? And if so, how many on this topic? Have you spent any time studying cultural anthropology, trying to understand the human condition within these contexts? Because every time a crime happens, it's a tear through the fabric of society. Are we making any effort to repair these tears? Or are we going to end up with just a shredded world full of broken people? Someone needs to pay attention to the brokenness that true crime represents and find a way to repair that brokenness in society. Some of the questions we deal with is, how should you grieve? How should we deal with law enforcement? How should we deal with each other? How tolerant should we be of people who lie, like we've seen in this case, who use the curiosity people have, and you manufacture things, but don't worry, my community doesn't care if I lie, it's just too much fun. Charlie says, hasn't there always been criminals? Moscow has never seen a quadruple homicide, so that's something new. That's something new. And I think there's something to be said about this case and the whole true crime thing, the whole true crime genre. I think this case asks the true crime genre to look at itself in the mirror, in the sense of, yeah, you've got someone who's come out of a criminology field. And, you know, his lecturer includes like this world-renowned author. Where is that information? I think it's over here. So I'm just trying to find her name again. There it is, Catherine Ramsland, a forensic psychologist, and he researched psychology of criminals, blah, 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 blah. She wrote How to Catch a Killer. She wrote The Mind of a Murderer, and he studied under her. And of course, she doesn't want to talk about the case. As far as I know, she hasn't spoken about the case. And you kind of got to ask why. Why would you talk about that? Why wouldn't you almost the best person to talk about, what did you notice with this kid that was your student? And so what I'm trying to say is, this is kind of in a way, a very weird mirror that the true crime community has to itself. You have what appears to be a killer that is using the knowledge that has been put together by criminal profilers and whatnot in order to do the very thing that we are all gathered here that we don't want to see happen, right? In other words, you've got someone, you've got a, what do you call it? You've got an interloper, you've got someone who is like an intruder in our midst. You've got an enemy, you've got like a wolf in sheep's clothing right around you. Well, do you have anything like that on YouTube? Do you have anything like that going on YouTube? So you've got YouTubers talking about, I think that person may have told a lie. I think that person may be manipulating us. I think that person may be deceiving you. Maybe that's misdirection in the true crime thing. And YouTubers, aren't they doing that as well? But we all true crime people now, we only look at the criminals. What about looking at ourselves? What about just being critical in a general sense, right? So here you have Koberger, this idea of him coming out of a doctorate, a thesis in the criminal field. And this is how he expresses his interest in it. And if that's the case, if he is if law enforcement have found good reason to charge him, right? Hasn't he decided that he really doesn't like society, and in terms of the criminal mind trying to catch the criminal, and the criminal mind being set free, being allowed to perpetrate, being allowed to shed blood? What choice do you think he made there? The choice between being a good guy, trying to prosecute and pursue criminals based on this knowledge, or being the bad guy, well, let's be the criminal but pretend to be doing that. Are YouTubers that different in that sense? We prosecuting, we're going after a criminal, right? We're ostensibly going after a criminal, Meanwhile, we're also doing that. No. I'm studying criminology. No, but aren't you doing something else? No. I'm actually trying to. I'm dealing with true crime here, but maybe I'm actually doing something else. So I don't really think that way. I don't think that crimes happen because someone is evil. Because good people, all good people are capable of evil, and all evil people are capable of good. No one is all good or all evil. There's some good in criminals, and there's some bad in people who don't break the law. No one is entirely innocent or entirely guilty. The evil thing is a joke as well. As soon as you hear someone talking about evil, well, that's another label. You're not making any attempt to understand what you're talking about. So anyone who is using labels, narcissist, psychopath, serial killer, whatever, most often that label is wrong. And as you saw in my acoustic video, if one note is off, it spoils the whole thing. Well, what if you don't even have the where the camera is right? You've just made a mess of your analysis. If you use the wrong label, you've just made a total mess of that as well. I wouldn't be surprised if someone down the line says, I believe Coburg is a narcissist because, he smiled during his booking photo. No, but that's a fake photo. No, it wasn't. And so you put that into the narrative, and now somebody's got to set that straight till the end of time. But no, it was a lot of fun. One of the idiosyncratic aspects of this guy is that he never smiles. Yeah, no, exactly. And you know what it is, Mel, is it's a situation where people are desperate for information. They're desperate for simple answers, quick, simple answers. And some guy puts up his hand and he says, I can do that for you. I can give that to you. And all I've got to do is cheat and lie and be dishonest, but I can do that. And I can get very rich from doing that, and I can be very popular from doing that. I recognize that there's this insatiable demand for information, and at the same time, people are too impatient to wait or to listen to whatever reasonable but tedious, sometimes tedious explanations. I can deliver exactly what you want, when and how you want it, and you're going to love it. This is true crime. Yeah, so I'm allergic to labels. I really hate labels. I must really wrap this up. It's been almost 3.5 hours. I think I've made my point. True crime has no place for fakery, fakers, jokers, entertainers. And that's also why, maybe you say, I don't want to use my real name and I don't want to use my real photo. But maybe if a few more people do, it'll just be a slightly more genuine place. For a few more creators, use their real names, whatever. Maybe they'll be a bit more prepared to or incentivized to tell the truth. Because if you behind an avatar and you don't give your name, it's actually still possible to find who you are, and you will pay the piper. Maybe you don't think so, but it will just make it a bit more of an honest community. And think about it, there are channels like Scott Reich. He gives his name, and it's a great channel. There you go. And there are quite a few channels that are like that. So why can't we see more of that? Why do you have someone dressed like a clown and you can't even see what their face looks like? And then they say, this is the perpetrator before the affidavit comes out. On that point, I always say not all liars are murderers, but all liars. Sorry, not all. How does it go? Not all liars are murderers, but all murderers are liars. And so lying, just telling lies, can actually lead to murder. Why? Because you're starting to live a lie. And when you live a lie, you make up excuses, you rationalize, and you tell stories that aren't true. And you get used to getting away with things that you should be paying for, right? And so that's how it starts. You can't have a murderer without someone who's living a lie. And what was the person in this case doing? Didn't he feel like he was living a lie and he didn't want to anymore? And so, I mean, I felt this when I studied marketing, but I felt this for so much of my life. It feels like the entire human society is based around us telling lies to one another. You lie about products and you con people with good deals or supposedly good deals. And, you know, it's such a rare thing to actually see honesty. When you say, I'm the most authentic voice in true crime, that really makes me uncomfortable. No, you're not. What a joke. But on the other hand, isn't that something worth pursuing, but worth aspiring towards? Authenticity. Isn't that what true crime needs? Authenticity. Isn't that what this world needs? Authenticity. You know, in a world that is so full of lying and liars, and look where the world is. Look at, like, if you say, look where the world is right now. Some people are worried that things aren't going to continue as they have for a lot longer. That the world could literally start cooking and all that sort of thing. Isn't that because we've been lying to ourselves for such a long time? Isn't it time for widespread honesty? Isn't it time for widespread genuineness? And not to put too fine a point on it, but when you saw law enforcement arrive at this party house, weren't you a little bit disappointed? You might have said, yeah, I might have done the same thing at their age. But weren't you a bit disappointed that it was quite a simple thing? You guys are being a bit noisy. Sorry, I'll sort it out. No one lives here. I don't know who lives here. Nobody takes responsibility. No one's taking responsibility. What if somebody did? I'm doing that. I'm taking responsibility as a true crime narrator and creator and commentator to hold myself to a high standard. I'm taking responsibility for that. I limit myself in the sense that there's certain things I could do, but I think it's unethical, so I don't do it. There's certain things that could make my life a lot easier. I could just say Dee's name, and it would sound better, and we would all know what we're talking about. But we go to the effort not to do that. It's having a little bit of self-discipline, reining yourself in a little bit, and not really taking the easy path, not because you're trying to be a hero, but because isn't that what is necessary? Anyway, I think that's enough from the most Van Gogh voice in true crime. It's the most Van Gogh voice because Van Gogh wasn't really appreciated very much in his time. He wasn't really very respected. His work didn't really do that well. Didn't do well at all, actually. He was miserable, but he lived for his work. I don't know if that's a perfect description of me, but yeah. What else about Van Gogh? ultimately his work did shine through, and people appreciated it after the fact. But I'd love you guys to appreciate what we're doing here during the fact. If it's too much to ask for, well, I guess I can accept that. I mean, that is why I studied law in the first place, was I like the idea of justice. I like the idea of holding people to a high standard. I like the idea of fairness and fair play and what is reasonable and what would the reasonable man do, right? Don't you? Don't you like the idea of a fair society, a just society, a society that can trust itself and trust one another, compared to a society that you can't trust, people that you can't trust? Gene says, I'm not cutting my ear off. I don't actually think he cut his ear off. That's the other joke. I don't actually think Van Gogh cut his ear off. I think Paul Gauguin, he was in an altercation with him, and he actually had swords, and that's actually from a sword. Anyway. Okay, well, I'm glad some of you like what I'm doing. I know I've got quite a few haters out there, but I think you're not doing your job if somebody doesn't like you, especially in this area. Thanks a lot, Giant Mad Bum. Okay. I don't know, if you've ever seen real autopsy photos, that speaks a million words. You feel 1,000 feelings. You feel that what that person has lost, they've lost everything. You see in vivid detail the destruction of a young, beautiful body and life. Permanent destruction. And at the same time, you feel this rising, indignant, righteous anger. It's totally deserved. That is directed at the perpetrator. That he knows what he did. Nobody else does. You know quite a lot of what he did because you saw the autopsy photos, but no one else is allowed to see it typically, right? And that's where you sort of feel like you want to have a sense of a mission, almost like a sacred mission, to spread light and truth and goodness in a world that is just so full of darkness. There's so many people that saying, I'm here for the victim's family. I'm here, but you're also spreading a lot of noise and nonsense. There's enough noise and nonsense and darkness in the world to add to it. It's so hard just to find that authentic narrative. There's so many things that are hard enough just trying to figure out what they are. Like just on this thing of where's 1112 King Road? That's hard enough without having to deal with all this other stuff. Now you've got to deal with true crime and then debunking fake stuff that's taking up more and more of everybody's time. Anyway, so that's it from me. Terry says, my infatuation with true crime has purpose and meaning. That's really what we want. If you think about crimes, they happen because someone has lost their sense of meaning, and this is a way to force meaning back into their mythos, right? I think a lot of people are here in the whole true crime space in search of some kind of sense of meaning. How do I deal with my anxiety? How do I deal with my loneliness? How do I deal with brokenness? How do I deal with life that is either empty or, I don't know, whatever, unsatisfying? Well, let's look at the drama of something else. Okay, let's do that. But let's find something that's genuinely meaningful out of it. Let's learn something that's truly edifying. I can't help looking at the lives that were lost here and thinking back to my university days. I went to university. right? Can you talk intelligently about this case if you never went to university? Maybe, but can you talk more realistically about it if you did? I went to university, and I look at the lives that they enjoyed, and I wish my university was more successful. I mean, I was going to go to the University of Cape Town, and they didn't have the law degree that I wanted, so I ended up going to a much shabbier university. And it ended up being quite cool. I sort of went through a triathlete journey and adventure, which is really good. And I had really good friends, and I ended up having a very good experience. But I do wonder, couldn't it have been better if I was in Cape Town? Shouldn't it have been better? But you can't really think that way. You can only deal with now. What have you got to work with now? And you look at Kaylee, she was about to go backpacking in Europe. She bought a new car. She's about to go. Anyone can start that life at any moment that they decide to do that. But you've got to have that sense of life is an adventure. Life is a party, not life is a sufferfest. You know what I mean? The way that you see life, if you say life is, how do you answer that? What's the next word that you put there? That's the way you see life. Is life a party? Is life a struggle? Is life hard? Is life good? Is life bad? That's the way, that's how you see life. That is the way life is. And so one of the challenges with true crime is to see life as it is, but then also to say, what if it could be this way? How can we get ourselves to that point? To make life good, but truly good. To make life better, truly better. Well, the best way to do that is to make ourselves better, to get ourselves to a place where we can make a better world. One person at a time eventually becomes a village and a community and a world. It starts with you, starts with me. It starts with you and me being honest. It starts with you and me being real in the real world and making the real world really genuinely a better place in a real measurable way. It starts with appreciating what's wrong with the world, but in a real way, not in a fake way, not in that way. Not what's wrong with him because he's smiling. No, that's actually fake. What's wrong with the world in a real way, and then let's find our way to the right way. Let us be right and then get on the right track. That's quite a funny thing. I almost studied filmmaking myself. I would have, in another life, I would have loved to have been a movie maker, a movie director. Still would like to, actually. I think I have that sort of vision of what I want, but a kind of an artistic vision. And anyway, I would love to do that one day. Thanks a lot, Cynthia. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap up. I know I've said it before, but now I think I really am. I'll just go through the last couple of comments. I just want to thank the mods that are here, the members that are here. Stephanie, are you still here? Jean says life is hard, but has joy. You know, if you accept that life is hard, it immediately becomes easier, right? And I think this is a big insight into this case and this criminal. If you acknowledge that life is hard, you don't rage against it, you don't struggle against it, you're not like, cheapest, but life's so unfair. Yeah, it is. And now do your thing. As soon as you acknowledge that, the rest becomes so much easier because you realize, yes, it is for everybody. Everyone has their trials and tribulations. Life isn't easy. And as soon as you recognize that, it becomes easier. Because you're not in that sort of state of mind of expectation, I deserve, and as long as I don't get what I'm supposed to get, there's this tension and whatever. No, it is hard. It is a challenge. Build yourself up. do what needs to be done. Yeah. Life is definitely much, much harder and much, much easier for different people. That's definitely true. Julie says, this crime has affected me also. You know, I actually meant to mention this earlier. You would imagine Brian Enton, who's on the ground there, would be the person who would have the most real sense of what is going on, right? And yet I remember him on Banfield saying, I think when he met the Gonzalez family, he said something like, and you realize then that it's real. And so you even have that situation where you've got a reporter on the ground, he's at the house, he's in that fabric, he's in the community, and yet he's in a way distracted, or there's a degree of separation between him, even though he's pursuing the reality of this case and the reality of this case. Meaning, it's the chasing of the story, it's the trying to secure an interview, it's this, it's that. Meanwhile, aren't you missing something? That there's actually somebody here that died, and this is their mother, and that's their father. And you get a bit of a sense of who that person is through that. Here's another person, right? I'm just saying, it's an incredible thing to think that the guy who's the closest to this case, one of the closest that you can imagine, Brian Enton, can have this experience where he realizes, wow, I've actually only just now felt myself getting a real sense of what this is. You know what I'm talking about? In other words, you take yourself away and you actually let the spirit of what is happening actually touch you. You let the things that are there touch you. You don't impose yourself on them or whatever. In other words, you allow that to actually touch you. And I think we're not seeing really much of that. I think we need to see more of that. Don says, I pray he's given life. Okay, I don't know if he will request death. It does look like he's going to be defending himself. Heavenly Cloud says, this case makes me wonder what B says about everything that happened, certainly. Jean says, a 6-year-old in Virginia did that, yeah. And he says, the magnitude hit me when I was telling my husband about it. You know what I always find so fascinating and troubling and interesting about true crime is when you have these really, really big cases, like the Gabby Petito case, to some extent the Summer Wells case, to some extent the Chris Watts case, also this case. To me, it talks to me about the wound that is in society, where society pays attention to certain cases and doesn't pay that much attention to others. But society pays attention to these cases because it's dealing with something that resonates, and that is telling us something about society. Often it's young lives lost. Often it is someone who's pursuing a fairy tale only for it to be cruelly taken away from them. Isn't that the story of most of our lives? The Gabby Petito case was these two youngsters going on this grand adventure through these spectacular landscapes, but in the middle of a pandemic. And this almost like this beautiful love story in a spectacular setting, only for it to end in the most horrible, terrible nightmare. And it's like, that's not supposed to happen. Just like a pandemic's not supposed to happen. That's what we were feeling. We also want to be free. We also want to love. We also want to have an adventure. And there's this terrible feeling that in the middle of reaching for your adventure, reaching for your fairy tale, you can be destroyed. Taking that risk, reaching out, your life can be destroyed. Love is a risk. Travel is a risk. Life is a risk. But through some of these stories, you get a real sense of that without actually leaving your lounge or your whatever. You get a sense that someone was living their life and then reality caught up to them. The ugliest possible reality caught up to them. That can happen. And it was weird for me to be telling these stories over and over again. And then I almost died last year. I came so close to being crushed by a car coming out of nowhere, just totally out of nowhere. And then you realize tomorrow isn't guaranteed. An hour from now is not guaranteed. A minute from now is not guaranteed. I mean, it's certain that everybody is going to die. It's just a question of when. And so maybe in a way we look at this as a way of gently reminding ourselves of that and then say, maybe we should readjust what we're doing, thinking, saying. Yeah, I think we do. Don says, your way of journalism, thanks very much. Wow, really appreciate that. Okay. This is the 10th time I'm saying goodbye. I just want to thank all of you guys for your supportive comments here. I really think what I said today has needed to be said. Really needs to be said, but it also needs to be said almost in a daily thing when we deal with true crime. Sometimes you want to deal with the evidence, but we need to be reminded that this needs to be a meaningful exploration, not a gratuitous exploration. We need to come out the other side and live and do something that's edifying and affirmative, not just keep going down the dark, destructive true crime rabbit hole endlessly, introspectively, because you can introspect infinitely. At some point, you've got to come out and it's got to take you somewhere that's better than where you were. That's where I want to get you guys. That's where I want to get myself, right? Stephanie's bought a treadmill. I want to encourage you guys to do that. Okay. It does seem that way. Okay, last comments. I hope so. Thanks, Catherine. This has been cleansing. I think Ashley Banfield said something like when she sometimes watches what is on social media, she says she needs to take a shower afterwards. Did anyone catch her saying that? Yeah. What I would like it to be is just it teaches you to think critically. It teaches you to be real, teaches you to be realistic. It teaches you to look at a given situation where there are facts, some known and some unknown, and you're able to put all of that together in a way that's real, and then take that whole thing and apply it to your life, apply it to your situation, right? It's a hell of a thing being real. The fact that we're all going to die, that's something that is very difficult to be real about. It's not easy. We are animals. We are creatures that are conscious of our own extinction. It's not a joke. It's not easy to do, but it is something we need to figure out. Can something good come from bad? Can you turn a negative into a positive? That's the question. You need to get the answer to that. You need to find the answer to that question. Carver, I don't know what to say about that question. I'm not even going to answer it. Okay, guys. Sharon says, great live. I hope it was. I hope you got something out of this. Thanks everyone for being here. And I think I'm going to try and wrap this up at 3:45. So that I think that makes sense. Thanks everyone for being here. You're a great community. And I'm going to be dealing with what is he trying his hardest to demonstrate and what need does he serve by killing in the next analysis. So look out for that. I hope you find it answers a lot of your questions. And I hope you find it quite a powerful and incisive analysis. I hope so. Take care, guys. All the best. See you next time.